All right, good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the July 15th, 2020 business meeting of the Daytona Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. We're happy to have each of you with us this evening. At this time, Ms. LaMagna will review the procedures for tonight's meeting.
Okay, so for tonight for the City Commission meeting, agendas and exhibits pertaining to items on the agenda are in the lobby. Although persons are strongly encouraged to submit online public comment forms during the state of emergency, persons may visit City Hall during a public meeting to make public comments on propositions coming before the City Commission for a vote, subject to city procedures and all social distancing requirements established by the governor's executive orders. The Commission chambers will be closed to the public. City Hall lobby will be equipped with a lectern and a microphone for public comment and audio-video feed to the City Commission chambers. Yellow forms will be provided for persons who wish to make public comment. Persons may enter the lobby to speak on an item before the City Commission at the appropriate time when called upon for 2.5 minutes. The lobby will also have a limited defined area with social distancing for persons waiting to make public comment. In addition, the exterior entryway of City Hall will be equipped with a loudspeaker for persons waiting for permission to enter to make public comment due to space limitations in the lobby. Persons may also monitor public meetings from their iPhone, iPad, or other electronic device on the city's website and enter City Hall for public comment at the appropriate times. Persons who have finished speaking or not intending to speak on a matter coming before the City Commission will not be permitted to remain in City Hall. All persons must comply with social distancing requirements while at City Hall, such as by remaining at least 6 feet apart. Use of facial masks is mandated to combat the spread of COVID-19. Item number 7 is the opportunity to address the City Commission concerning any item on the consent agenda. Please indicate on the yellow speaker sheet the agenda item number of the item or items you are addressing. Items or discussions not listed on the consent agenda will not be heard during this comment section. Agenda items under item number 9 are public hearings, and citizens may speak at the designated time. And resolutions under item number 10 are also open for public comment, and citizens may speak at the designated time. All citizens completing a yellow form will be allowed to speak for 2.5 minutes. When you approach the lectern, please speak clearly into the microphone and give your full name and address. The 2.5-minute clock on the monitor above the dais will start running when you begin to speak. Pay close attention to your time. You will be told when your time has expired. Disorderly conduct in the public meeting of the City Commission. Article 2, Section 6238 of the City Code of Ordinances reads as follows. It shall be unlawful for any person to behave in a riotous or disorderly manner in any public meeting of the City Commission, or any committee, agency, or board thereof, or to cause any unnecessary disturbances therein by force, shouting, or any other action calculated to disrupt such meeting, or to refuse to obey any ruling of the presiding officer or such meeting relative to the orderly process thereof. Please be courteous and respectful of the views of others. Personal attacks on the City Commission, city staff, or members of the public are not allowed. All conversation must take place either at the lectern or on the dais so that everyone can hear the business being discussed tonight.
Thank you, Ms. LaMagna. May we have a roll call?
Commissioner Delgado?
Present.
Commissioner May?
Here.
Commissioner Gilliland?
Here.
Commissioner Henry?
Here.
Commissioner Reed?
Present.
Commissioner Tager?
Here.
Mayor Derek L. Henry.
Here.
Okay. Moving on to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the June 17, 2020 regular City Commission meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. We'll now move on to our agenda item. If there is any changes to our agenda, our city manager will read those at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to move item 8F from the consent agenda to public hearings. It'll be the first item under public hearings. And we're going to pull item 8I from this agenda, and we're going to add addendum to number 9G to emergency ordinance to the agenda as an emergency ordinance regarding face covering.
Motion to approve is amended.
Second.
All right, the motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we have no presentations tonight. Moving on to item number 7, this is public comments by people addressing the City Commission. This is the opportunity for people to address the City Commission on any item that is on the consent agenda. And I had no one to sign up to speak for any item that is still on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. We have no items, so we'll move on.
And I'm sorry, yes, we have no other public speakers for this item.
Okay.
So we're moving to the consent agenda.
Yeah, motion.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item 8A. A few meetings ago, we talked about an extension to the building permit waiver
Yeah.
that we had in place, and that did not actually make it into the emergency order revision that we did soon thereafter. So it is in tonight's, but actually, based on the time frame we had talked about, it would only allow for a 7-day extension from today. So I'd like to pull this so we can talk about that and see if that's really what we want to do, or perhaps go a little longer. So
Great.
I'd like to pull item 8A and move approval of the rest of the consent agenda.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. We'll pull item 8A. Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner,
Okay. All right. Second from Commissioner Reed. A motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. We've got 2 items that'll go at the front. Which one are we going to carry first? Item 8A?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So item 8A is the Legal Department resolution extending the local state of emergency. A resolution extending the local state of emergency due to COVID-19 for an additional 7-day period ending July 22nd, 2020, extending the waivers and deferrals of building permit fees previously approved by Resolution 2020-70 and providing an effective date.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. I was wondering why I was getting calls on that from some people as it related to this situation.
Mr. Mayor, I would propose that we amend it to make it a 60-day extension instead of 30. So that would give 37 days from now for people to take advantage of that opportunity. And I'll do that in the form of a motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Got a motion
Second.
and a second, and then we'll try to sunset that at that point. I hope, but you know we can always revisit it.
Yes,
I do think we have to at some point sunset it. But thank you for pulling that and addressing it. Got a motion and a second. Any other comments?
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to point out that this will apply retroactively to any people that have paid their permit fees during this interim. So those funds will be refunded to the developer
Or the resident?
or the resident. Yes, either way.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Question, what will that end date be now?
It'll be roughly August 22nd. I'll have to look at the calendar to see exactly where that falls, but within a day or two of August 22nd.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our public hearing items, and item 8F was moved to the public hearings. This is the Permits and Licensing Division non-ad valorem assessment for collection of 2020 demolition costs, resolution, public hearing, a resolution of the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, related to the non-ad valorem assessment roll demolitions and other practices utilized by the city, providing for the incorporation of recitals herewith, providing for the approval and adoption of non-ad valorem assessment roll for demolition costs and expenses, providing for certification of the assessment roll, providing for severability, providing for conflicting resolutions, and providing an effective date.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Gilliland and a second. All those, do you have any questions or comments or?
I do have speakers for this item, Mr. Mayor. Our first speaker is Cicely Rutzler, and on deck is James Harper.
Hello. I received a notice about the assessment, and it came to me in my name, but I don't own that property. I have nothing to do with it, and I just want to make sure I'm not held accountable for this demolition cost. And I don't even know how my name got associated with the property, other than the fact I lived there for 18 months back in 1980 with my mom, and I was a minor, so I don't know if I can get my name disassociated with this. Property is 340 and 342 Taylor Avenue.
I'll be glad to look at that. The lien would only attach to the property, whoever owns it. So if you're a former owner or tenant, it shouldn't matter.
I wasn't though, so I don't know how I was 14 years old, so I don't know how I got associated with it.
I'll review that piece.
What's that you'll look at?
I'll take a look.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and our next speaker is James Harper.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is James Harper, 341 Weaver Street, Daytona Beach, Florida. It's been a minute since I've addressed you folks. Ms. LaMagna, I wouldn't have recognized you. Blonde bombshell, I like that. Having said that, I will be speaking about another issue on the next item, but this particular item was just put back on the board. The last time you all did a big heavy demolition, it left a lot of pockets in the black area of the city. And I noticed that most of these properties are mainly located in the black areas. So there's going to be a lot of places that are going to be empty, so to speak. And then I guess if the property owner does not pay the demolition fee, then it goes to the city. Is that correct? The property, and so that means more property the city will own?
It actually goes to a tax deed sale and to auction.
It'll be auctioned off? Yeah, I've seen that done before. Well, my concern, again, is depending upon the location of these properties, because I know the last time y'all did something like that with the auction, that I remember anyways, the people living next to these properties weren't given first option to purchase the properties. So that's something you might want to consider for future reference. Hopefully, we don't just have these sites in the middle of the city because they're not going to be maintained. Are the city going to be responsible for maintaining the properties once the demolition take place? That's something else that has been considered. What I mean by maintaining is cutting the grass, because there are a number of city properties right now in the city where the grass is not being maintained. And I know that you all own some of those properties. So that is something else that needs to definitely be in your minds when you go to demolizing, tearing down these properties. So hopefully these people are, most of them probably out of town owners, so they need to be definitely addressed. But again, it kind of saddens me that so many of these properties are in the black areas of the city. But again, more than likely they're absentee landowners, I'm assuming. Thank you, I'll be back.
Can we ask questions? So my question is, do we have a plan for those areas in terms of when they are vacant? What is the plan for that? They're just, if there's cement, there's cement. Is that what happens?
What do you want?
I'm wondering, I'd like to know what is going to happen, the gentleman's question, when we demolish these, right? It's up to the owner to do first right of refusal with the neighbor. They can approach them that way. Is that correct?
They could do it several ways, but typically they'll have a tax sale on the courthouse steps if it's not, not reimbursed.
So two questions here, and I don't want to get too deep into the tax deed sale because it's all handled by the county. It's not really us, but they, it has to do with obtaining title to the tax deed sale. It gives clear title to the person that has the tax deed certificate. So the question you've posed is, how is the property maintained after demolition?
I mean, given that
So,
right here in Johnson, a lot of properties in both, I mean, in the more poor area of town, let's say, they're already separated. So my question is it possible to, what can we do with that?
well, we do
How
have
do
a
we
code
handle it?
provision which regulates overgrown weeds and rubbish and so forth on property. So if that condition continues after notice, the city can go in and mow and clean out the property and put another lien on the property.
We do have a contract to do that with different companies.
And then-
One thing is, we do want to see the property, the preference is that the property be developed into another, especially if it's in the areas that Mr. Harper illustrated. We want to see those areas with residents, so we would like to see them redeveloped. And I've seen that taking place in a number of areas, especially in Midtown, where homes have been demolished and there have been replacement homes built. And that's the preference from my perspective, as opposed to someone just expanding their lot. But, you know, certainly if someone expanded their lot, they would be a taxpayer and they would be more inclined to take care of the property. So that's valuable also.
Mr. Mayor, I got a notice. I guess there's a technical problem. People are not seeing the feed live. They're seeing some playback of a COVID video. I just wanted to bring that to the people's attention. And I tried to send a chat message, but just, I don't know if there's a problem with the video right now.
Okay.
All right.
And I have had no other speakers for this item.
Okay, we have no other speakers. We have a motion and we have a second.
Yeah.
Do we have any other comment from the commission? Okay, hearing none, all those who are in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Moving on to item 9A, it's the Citizens Police Review Board. This is an ordinance on second reading public hearing. An ordinance amending the City Code of Ordinances to create Article 5 of Chapter 58, establishing the Citizens Police Review Board, establishing member composition and terms, providing for disciplinary reviews and police policies and procedures reviews, repealing all ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
Who made the motion?
Reed and Gilliland.
Okay, all right, I know we have a speaker, so let's hear from the speakers.
Okay. My first speaker is Cynthia Slater, and on deck is Pastor Victor Gooden.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, others on the dais. My name is Cynthia Slater. I am the president of the Volusia County Daytona Beach NAACP. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
The NAACP is pleased to know that this commission voted to approve of the creation of a Citizens Review Board. One of the NAACP initiatives was to advocate for police reform with the creation of such a board. It is vital that this board be one that is inclusive and represents the citizens of Daytona, meaning that that board should be made up of residents of Daytona Beach. The board should be made up, and it should not have any ulterior motives. As written in your ordinance 2020, you stated that the intent of this board, and I quote, it's being created to assist in maintaining the confidence of the citizens, of the city's citizens, that high-leveled internal disciplinary investigations of alleged police officer misconduct, regardless of their source, are being thoroughly and objectively investigated and resolved. I would be interested, and I am interested, to see how strong this board is once it has been assigned. The NAACP hope that the application process is fair and that the integrity of this commission is not in question or is not scrutinized. The NAACP will be scrutinizing this process as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my next speaker is Pastor Victor Gooden, and on deck is James Harper. And if you just give her a second, sir, she'll wipe that off.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners,
and staff. Let me first say thank you for this initiative to establish the Citizens Review Board concerning our police department. There's some things I want to mention in my time as I've read the document. I read the word in it, said unbiased. I'm concerned that this board doesn't become stacked so that even though the makeup of who's on it will reflect our community, but stacked so that it doesn't do what the ordinance and what everything is written in there to do. The second, it needs to have at least 2 alternates in case someone cannot complete the requirements or they need to be replaced. But the other thing I want to mention to you, my third thing, is that when people are selected for this board, they need to already have gone through the classes and whatever needs to be done, the ride-alongs and so on, prior to them being able to sit on there to even hear the first review. My fourth point, as it relates to convicted felons, they can vote now. And so that's something that you all need to look at. However, in the case where it's been a rape, sexual offender, or so on, I can see these type of convicted felons being excluded. But this is something you need to review before it's finalized. My number 5 is the frequency of meetings need to be more than what's listed in the initial study that you have. And these are my items, so that ask that you please take these into consideration. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And before our next speaker comes up, just so you know that she's going to be wiping off the lectern in between each speaker. So our next speaker is going to be James Harper, and on deck is John Nicholson.
Okay, James Harper. Once again, Reverend Gooden said some things that I too was going to comment on. Again, to me, this is a bogus board, point blank. You all violated the fair chance policy last week 2 weeks ago, when you put in the ordinance that you wanted no felonies on the board whatsoever. Apparently, you've forgotten as to why this board was started to begin. Do you remember George Floyd? Remember that name, George Floyd? 8 minutes, 46 seconds. That's why this board was started, right? I'm assuming that was the reason why it came up. They've been trying to get one for years, but that was the reason it came up. You've got police departments around the country talking about defunding, disbanding, and diverting funds. And what do you all come up with? A police review board. It's a joke. It's a joke, okay? So having said that, if you want a real police review board, first of all, that board needs to start out by reviewing the record of every police officer that sits on the department. Every police officer. That board should then review all the policies that are in the police department, those policies that are causing them to be disrespectful and threatening to our citizens. There are police officers right now that will arrest people only for resisting arrest with violence or obstructing justice just because they can, or asking for their priors. They're prejudiced because of that. Respect needs to be the main thing that's happening here. The other thing that needs to be addressed by a police review board is a review of the budget. I mean, disbanding and defunding is not going to happen. We know that already. But funds can be diverted from the budget of the police department. One thing that money could go toward is a youth initiative. More programs to help our youth to not get caught up in this system, right? We don't want our youth to become caught up in the system, all righty? And other initiatives, including programs like Upward Bound or the Powell Center. And money could go towards that. Money could be used, and this is one of my favorites right now, because again, you all have forgotten about George Floyd, but we need to have pointed right out here on Orange Avenue, Black Lives Matter. That money, so money can come from the police department where Black Lives Matter is painted on Orange Avenue or Palmetto, so that we don't forget why we are here. We don't want any biased or racist cops or people in the department. On that note, Thank you very much. And again, I hope you all will vote to start all over again. Back to the drawing board.
Thank you, sir.
Back to the drawing board, please. Thank you.
Your time is up.
Go ahead, Kim. And our next speaker tonight, our final speaker on this item is John Nicholson, if you give her just a second.
John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. Before I start, Bob, we can't hear you outside. Secondly, I don't oppose this board. I don't see a need for it. They've been asking for it for a year. Having it or not having it is not really the issue. It's how you create this board and who you put on the board that's important. They keep asking for representation of the city. But we had a race relation board years ago, and you picked the wrong people on the board. It was stacked. You will do the same thing on this board until you determine what the makeup is going to be. It's nice to have a police officer, it's nice to have this, but if you look at how you choose people in the past, you do it by color. There are 2 people on this commission who only choose people of color for their boards. This one cannot be that kind of a board. You have to look at how are you going to do the percentages. To have a board of 5 and have 4 blacks is not going to work because it's not going to be accepted, like the race relation board was not accepted. I understand the black community has more interest in this than anybody else. They're more affected than anybody else. But trust me, white people get the same garbage from the police officers that everybody else does. So have the board, look at it carefully, but watch who you put on it, and don't do it racially. Keep it in mind, but don't stack the board. Thank you.
And that was my final speaker on this item, Mr. Mayor.
All right, colleagues, anyone want to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor, I got a couple questions for Bob, just quickly to make sure that, to get this on the record. So, Bob, this was modeled after boards from other jurisdictions, primarily in Florida, correct?
That's correct.
And the law enforcement officer Bill of Rights, this in the Florida statutes, that had there been a conflict between these types of ordinances and that Bill of Rights, it probably would have already been hashed out through those other jurisdictions.
And that is, in fact, the reason why the IA review by the board does not occur until after the full investigation by the department. To insert them into the investigation process would likely violate the police officer's Bill of Rights.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that was clear to everybody that the reason that it's structured the way that it is based on experience that other communities have had related to these types of boards. The IA finding has to be completed, and it's actually defined as to, there's only about 3 or 4 different, sustained, not sustained, unfounded, or exonerated. I think are the only 4 outcomes that can come from an IA investigation. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of this board would be to review, in those 4 types of cases, the outcomes of those, but it would be one of those 4 types of outcomes that are being reviewed. And then, Bob, lastly, in the event that there was the board found that disagreed with the discipline that had come out, the police officer would still have rights under through their union to grieve any additional discipline that might come out following this disagreement between the board and the initial discipline. Is that correct?
So again, yes, that's correct. And in fact, all those rights will have to have been lapsed or exercised and the case finally closed before it can be transferred to the Citizen Review Board.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that it was clear to, I got a fair number of questions where people kind of were going down a path that this ordinance doesn't lead down. And I thought it was important to make sure that those things were clarified, that, there still are, rights that the police officer has throughout the process. And, as I said, I don't think that we have, an issue over there. I think for a matter of transparency, I don't see a problem here. I think we do need to be cautious with making sure we don't get anti-police people on the board. But we'll deal with that as we get applications. But beyond that, I'll be supporting tonight.
If I may, thank you for that clarification, Commissioner Gilliland. It amazes me that when we have these discussions and make these decisions, and people are here every time we do that, how they think something totally different or assume something totally different, or they hear something totally different. So now you've clarified that for the record. And then I'd like to address, can they hear me in the atrium? Good. Because those two people who only put black people on their board, I'm assuming I'm one of them, but perhaps because the boards that I put people on, only black people want to get on there because it addresses black issues. I've never seen an application for John to get on any of my boards, but he probably doesn't qualify because he doesn't live in my zone. But we welcome anyone. I have black, white, red, yellow, and people that live in my zone. So anyone that's in my zone can apply. But it just so happens, and I'm sure he was talking about, I'm one of those that he's referring to. But it always amazes me when he comes to the mic, what comes out of his mouth. It's just amazing. You second that? It's interesting, but we all have an opinion, and some need to keep them to themselves.
I agree.
Thank you.
I agree with you 100%. I think the people that we put on our boards are people who apply for the boards. At least I believe I'm probably the second person that he was talking about. And
you think?
A lot of times I've never even seen the actual person.
Mm-hmm.
I've maybe talked to them, or I've gotten an email from them that they've applied, and sometimes I'm begging people to be on certain boards.
True.
There are a lot of times that I have to beg and plead, and then I have to ask certain people, would you be on 2 boards for me? And I have people that are on 2 boards. So I think it's a fallacy to believe and it's disingenuous to come up and say that certain people only put black people on their boards. I put whoever is a good fit, and whoever applies for my boards, that's who I appoint for my board. So John needs to go back to the drawing board on that one. Thank you.
Let me ask a question, Attorney Jagger. This board does give the capacity to review police procedures, right? Could you illustrate what that's like?
Yes, that is the second function of the board. They have the authority either through their own initiative or at the direction of the city commission or city manager to review police policies and procedures and to make recommendations.
So Mr. Harper, I believe it was, who illustrated that should be a function of the board, so that is met. Could you go over the 4 things that the board would review? Because there's only so many things that this board could do, and certainly I'm on record as one who's not supportive of defunding police, although I do believe we could spend money on PAL and on leisure services, but it doesn't have to be at the detriment of the police department's budget. But could you explain those things? Because I want to make sure that people understand what this will do, because it seems as though sometimes people are commenting on this and they haven't apparently read what this does.
All right. With regard to the review of internal affairs cases by the board, they only review 4 types of cases regarding officer discipline. Cases involving criminal conduct by the officer, excessive force, false arrest, or an unlawful search. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, it does. You did. Someone discussed the Policeman's Bill of Rights that earlier. These boards, could you illustrate what these boards could not do legally, even if we wanted them to do them?
So the function of the board, as it's drafted in this ordinance, is to review the IA process, if you will, and the disciplinary action that was handed down on an officer, if any. So at the conclusion of the investigation, they are authorized to make 2 findings, essentially one with regard to the adequacy of the investigation, and the second finding with regard to the discipline. And in that case, they make a finding as to whether they agree or disagree with the discipline. So that is their role with regard to IA case review.
Thank you. I take exception to the characterization that the board is a bogus board. It has a function, a defined function. The overall objective of the board, from my perspective, and we hope that it achieves its goal, is to create a greater relationship and better transparency between the community and the police department. It is to neither malign the department nor to subvert the rights of the public. It is to marry the two together and ultimately to have a better relationship between them. It is also my hope that we will select 7 members of the board who will represent the city of Daytona Beach well, regardless of their race, regardless of their background, but 7 people who will make unbiased decisions as it relates to these issues when they come before them. And you have my commitment, and I want the community to watch the process as we aspire to bring together a board that is both representative of the city, but most importantly, a board that aspires to make prudent decisions as it relates to these issues. I neither want folks on the board who believe that the police do no wrong, nor do I want folks on the board who have a bias or an agenda as it relates to the police. And I've met literally thousands and thousands of people in Daytona Beach, many of whom, of all races and of all backgrounds, I hold in high esteem and believe will do an outstanding and exceptional job on this board, and I look forward to the challenge of assembling a body that will do just that. Do we have any other comments from the commission?
Actually, yes. My question is it possible for them to do one ride-along per year? I'm not sure that one once upon admission to the board is adequate. I'd like to know if it's possible for them, at the discretion of the chief of police and whomever, to get one every single year for the board members, if possible.
So to answer your question, let me first state what's been drafted, and then we can talk about if you'd like to change that. So in terms of board training or the requirements to be on this board, each member is required to attend the police department presentation of the Citizens Academy. They're required to participate in a ride-along, and they're required to attend a use of force class not to exceed 2 hours, and to complete any other training as prescribed by the city manager. So your suggestion is that you require perhaps one ride-along per year. We could certainly revise this to provide for that at the board's discretion.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
I will concur with that. Do we have any objections to that?
No objection.
As it relates to the number of times that they're to meet, is it that they only meet every 3 months, or is it as necessary?
They meet at a minimum quarterly, but they can meet more often.
And that you don't want folks to meet when they have no business to meet for. However, you give them a minimum amount of meeting time. Therefore, you don't make the board cumbersome, but you make it purposeful. So I stand by that decision as it relates to the times that they meet. Does anyone else have an objection to that on the commission, or would they concur with the sentiments of one of our speakers? No.
I think quarterly in the beginning is fine. We could always change it if there's a need.
But that's a minimum, so if there's a need, they'll meet according to when they need to meet. And that's, to me, and if we, like you say, if we need to change it, then we'll change it.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that Section 58-200, Item K, be amended, Roman numeral 2, to be that the ride-along is annual.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Okay, I already did. Uh-huh.
Okay.
May 2nd.
In a second. Okay, there's no further questions or comments from the commission. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are in opposition, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Bob, do they have to approve the ordinance as amended? Because the motion for that was Commissioner Reed, and the second was Commissioner Gilliland, the original motion.
Okay. I thought I heard an amended motion. Did I not?
Yeah,
So I made a motion to amend that section K. So now that's been amended, we need to approve
Yeah.
the,
I amend my original motion.
okay.
and was I second? I amend my,
Yeah.
So we're going to vote on the amendment and then vote on,
They voted on the amendment, so we're going to vote the ordinance as amended.
so 2 votes.
Yes, so Commissioner Reed was the motion and Commissioner Gillen was the second.
Does everybody understand? We're going to vote first on the amendment to the motion and then second on the motion as amended.
so we just voted
Vote
on the amendment to the motion.
Right, so now we
Now
have
we're
to
voting
vote.
on the motion.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, we'll vote on the motion. We already have it. All those in favor, let it be
Aye.
noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
I would like to make a suggestion for a member of the board, Edith Shelley. She's been active in the community for many years. I believe her to be unbiased, and she has been active on all the sectors in the city, not just one. So I would like to have her be considered as a member of the review board. I think she would do a good job.
Thanks, but I think it's appropriate, we have to get the advertisement out and allow the entire public to,
Apply.
do their applications, and then we will have an opportunity to apply. Have you spoken with former Commissioner Shelley regarding that?
Excuse me?
Have you spoken with?
Yes, I have.
Okay, good. When Ms. Goodman gets the application prepared, just have Commissioner Shelley to apply, and then we will all consider her as we consider everyone who applies.
May I ask a question, sir, with regard to the application process? So each commissioner is not we're 7 members. Are we allowed to present a member, 2 members, or are we just sort of putting names into a pool that aren't in our zone, just people we think would be appropriate for this position? How are we managing it?
I'll let staff address that.
And these are at-large appointments.
Okay, at-large?
Appointments. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all righty.
not zone related.
Ruth, I agree with you that Edith would be great on that board.
I do too.
Okay.
I concur that Edith would be great. But I think, I know a lot of people that would be great, but I do think she would.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 9B, which is the Development Administrative Services Planning Division Land Development Code Text Amendment. This is an ordinance on second reading, public hearing. An ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Section 3.3, to add mail notice requirements for neighborhood meetings and public hearings involving proposed amendments to planned development agreements, amending LDC Section 3.4.f to revise regulations regarding PD agreement lapses, extensions, and amendments, amending LDC Section 4.8 to revise the applicability of the LDC to PD agreements originally approved prior to the adoption of the LDC, and to add additional content requirements for PD agreements, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Gilliland, and we have a second from Commissioner Traeger.
Or Commissioner May.
Commissioner May.
May, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And I have no speakers for this item, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and there are no speakers. There are no comment from the commission. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
If I may, thank you, everyone, that a lot of the PDs are actually out in my side of town. This will give a level of protection and transparency when people come back after the fact and want to make changes to, the developments that people have been accustomed to. Some of them are relatively new. I think we got a bunch of Margaritaville folks here tonight. Some have been around for a very long time, like Pelican Bay. But this is something that I think will make things more like a neighborhood and less like a business. So thank you for supporting.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to move on to item 9C. It's the City Manager's Office interlocal agreement with the City of Jacksonville. This is a resolution public hearing. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, approving the execution of an interlocal agreement with the City of Jacksonville, Florida, the issuer, approving the issuance by the issuer of its health care facilities revenue bonds, Brooks Rehabilitation, in one or more tax-exempt or taxable series in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $200 million, to to finance or refinance the cost of the acquisition, construction, and equipping of certain healthcare facilities to be located in the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, and the City of Jacksonville, Florida, of which not to exceed $20 million will be issued for the purpose of providing funds to make a loan to Genesis Health, Inc., a Florida non-for-profit corporation, to refinance a part of the cost of construction, installation, and equipping of such healthcare facilities located in the City of Daytona Beach, Florida, and providing an effective date.
And Mayor, if I may just be clear on this, this is what's known as a TEFRA hearing. It's required by the IRS. It does not actually involve a development or funds which would be loaned by the City of Daytona Beach. I believe the attorney for the hospital for Genesis Health is here.
Jack Holt, I'm from Rogers Towers, and we do represent Genesis Health and the hospital for this rehabilitation refinance.
So if you have any questions, you could certainly answer them.
No questions? All right. No comments? We have a motion and a second?
And I have no additional speakers.
Okay, no additional speakers. Got a motion? Got a second? Who was the motion?
Let's see.
Well,
I don't have a motion.
do we have a motion? That's what I thought.
All right, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all right. So we got a motion from Commissioner Gilliland and
Second was May.
second from Commissioner May. All right, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
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 Those in opposition, same sign. The motion carries 7-0.
Thank you and good evening.
Moving on to item 9D, it's the Public Works Technical Services Division preliminary and final plat for Latitudes Phase 5 approval. This is resolution quasi-judicial hearing. A resolution approving the preliminary and final plat for Latitude at Daytona Beach Phase 5, a residential subdivision on 248 plus or minus acres of land generally located northwest of LPGA and west of I-95, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute the contract for plat recording for the subdivision, authorizing the city manager to sign the final plat and permit recordation thereupon meeting certain conditions precedent and providing an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments?
I have no speakers for this item.
Okay. All right, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Moving on to item 9E, it's the Development and Administrative Services Clyde Morris Landings Proportionate Fair Share Agreement. This is a resolution public hearing. A resolution approving the Clyde Morris Landings Proportionate Fair Share Agreement between the City, Northern Investment Partners LLC, and the County of Volusia, providing the developer to pay a proportionate fair share contribution to Volusia County in relation to transportation facility concurrency for the Clyde Morris Landings Planned Development Project located on the east side of Clyde Morris Boulevard, approximately 1/3 mile south of LPGA Boulevard, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute the agreement and providing an effective date.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Yes, Commissioner
Oh, got a
Gilliland.
motion and a second. Okay. Do we have any questions or comments?
I do have Jessica Gao here on behalf of the applicant for any questions.
Okay. All right, we got a motion and a second. No questions of Jessica. We'll take a vote. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Moving on to item 9F. It is the Development and Administrative Services Planning Division, CLOR, Large Scale Comprehensive Plan Amendment. This is an ordinance on first reading, public hearing. An ordinance adopting comprehensive plan amendments in accordance with Chapter 163, Part 2, Florida statutes, adopting amendments to the future land use map, amending the future land use designation of 260 plus or minus acres of property generally located 0.5 miles west of Interstate 95 and north and east of Timber Creek Road from low-intensity urban and potentially environmentally sensitive to Level 1 residential and potentially environmentally sensitive. Amending future land use element neighborhood V to clarify development intensities and densities for the property, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions?
This is a public hearing.
Yes, I have a number of speakers, Mayor.
Okay.
The applicant here?
The first speaker is Rob Merrill, and on deck, I believe it's Dutch.
Eweiler.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. This is Rob Merrill with Cobb Coal, for the record, 149 South Ridgewood. Thanks, Commission. I'm going to be brief, and I'd like to make a couple points of order, if you don't mind. The first is that this is the public hearing, half of a two-part agenda item tonight, the second of which is number 10A, which is not a public hearing on first reading. So I want to make sure it's clear to everyone that's here to speak about this that it's the first item, not the second, that we're going to be speaking about. The second thing I would suggest to you as a point of order is typically when we have people, and I think there's some folks here today to express opinions about a land use amendment like this, normally your staff tells you about the land use amendment so you know what it is from an unbiased perspective. I don't mean to put you on the hot spot, Dennis. I did mention to you, it might be best for you to start by telling the commission what this is about, and then I'll give my perspective, and then you'll get a perspective from others, I think, if that's permissible. Thanks.
Nor if that's the will of the commission, does anyone want to hear from Dennis? Feel that you haven't heard about this, or do you need to hear from Dennis?
I think we need to hear from Dennis, because this is a fairly narrow request that's before us tonight. So I'd like for him to kind of set the foundation for us.
Absolutely. All right, proceed. Dennis?
Great, thank you. Please, if you're having trouble hearing me, just let me know. I never know if I can even hear myself right now. So, Dennis Mrozek, I'm a planning director with the City of Daytona Beach. This item is a large-scale comp plan amendment for the Clore property. The Clore property is a property we refer to. It's approximately, I had my notes over here, but approximately 375 acres. And it's located north of LPGA. It's east of Timber Creek, and it's west of 95. And the Tomoka River kind of splits the property. So this land use amendment actually it has two parts. It has the part on the east side of Tomoka River and has the part on the west side of Tomoka River. The part on the east side of Tomoka River, I'm going to find my notes here, is approximately 119 acres. And it has a neighborhood policy that's going to restrict the density to 1 dwelling unit per acre. So the maximum density permitted on that portion of property is going to be 119 dwelling units. There you go. All right. On the west side of Tomoka River, you have the 260 acres, which is part of the Minto development. That's the part that the rezoning application will be addressing. The 260 acres, there's a land use change to a level 1 residential. Level 1 residential permits up to 8 dwelling units an acre. With the amount of acres that they have, that'd be approximately 2,080 units. Part of their amendment with their land use change will limit the dwelling units to only 500 dwelling units per acre. Excuse me. 500 dwelling units per acre, and an amenity center.
Total?
I'm sorry, total. 500 units, 1.92 dwelling units per acre. Thank you. And then an addition of a 10,000 square foot amenity center associated with the development. So that's what we have. We have the two separate types of properties within this amendment that would be occurring. The Minto property is part of the rezoning, and that's the property that would be west of the Tomoka River. The property on the east side of the Tomoka River is the approximately 115 acres, and with the 1 dwelling unit per acre. So, and that's the request. And this is actually a transmittal stage. This has to go up to the state agencies for review. Also has to go to VGMC for review and comment, and then comes back to staff.
So Dennis, the potentially environmentally sensitive areas that are currently allowed or are currently defined in the comp plan, those are going to stay the same through this transmittal?
Correct. Whatever you see for potentially environmentally sensitive or significant remains in place as it is.
And then the current it's currently, what is, say here, low-intensity urban?
Correct.
What types of uses are allowed there under low-intensity urban?
It does allow residential units, a little bit more of a rural type of a residential unit. But it does have a floor area ratio. It does allow other types of uses. It could potentially allow some commercial or retail uses within there because of the floor area ratio, allowing that to occur.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. On the west side, you said it's going from 8 dwellings to 1.2 per acre?
On the west side, it's going from the land use changes from the, let's see here, I want to make sure I get this right, the low intensity urban to the level 1 residential. The level 1 residential permits up to 8 dwelling units per acre. Currently, on the overall site, there's limitations on the amount of units that could be developed on the site. Let's see, currently the 375 acres total, if you were to include the entire development, has a limitation of 191 dwelling units for the entire 375 acres.
Thank you.
And that's with a land use policy that has restricted that density. Okay. All right, thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
This is Rob Merrill again. Appreciate that, Dennis. And I think that gives you some clarity about what we're asking for. I'll try to just echo a couple of things he mentioned so you guys understand what we're asking for. Very basically, the change from low-intensity urban, which, as Dennis mentioned, it can allow a mixture of things, including residential units and commercial office, other type things that may or may not be appropriate or welcome by the folks out there in Margaritaville, to residential. And the residential that we're asking for is less than 2 units per acre, which is a little bit less than Margaritaville allows now. We are bringing the same exact housing product right next to the folks in Margaritaville. And I think the reason why you've got lots of emails from those folks out there that think this is a great idea is because they like their way of life out there, and this land use amendment is going to promote exactly what's out there now. As mentioned by the comment that Rob, the question that Rob asked, the portion of this future land use that has environmentally sensitive areas that are labeled as potentially environmentally sensitive, PES, acre per acre, the exact same piece of ground is going to keep that exact same designation. So I've heard at the planning board level that there were some questions about environmental impacts. I want to be very clear here that as a result of this land use amendment and things that will be coming later, that will not happen. There will be no impacts. I think that's important for you guys to know, and that's 141 acres of land that will continue to be in the PES designation. So more than half of this piece of land that Minto intends to develop with Margaritaville will be in that designation. So I think that's important for you guys to take into account. And again, I think that the reason why you're getting a great deal of support from folks out there is because they want the same thing that they have now to continue, not something else that could happen. So the noise you're hearing out there is the people that don't agree with that. So you'll hear from them, I'm sure, and they were just as vocal at the planning board. I hope we have some courtesy and decorum when they come to you. But at the same time, I'm happy to hear from them, and I wanted another procedural point is have the opportunity to rebut and or reply to comments, and I'll reserve my time to do that. Dutch Neuweiler, who is the representative of Minto, is here, and I think he's had some interaction with the neighborhood. If you want to speak before, it might be appropriate, Dutch. And his form is right behind Tish.
My name is Dutch Neuweiler, Minto Communities. I just want to mention, we did have the required neighborhood meeting, but we also met with the residents inside the community at our amenity center and did a question and answer session with our residents and sent out multiple communications via our homeowners association's communication tools via email, and then met with individual residents as the COVID restrictions permitted us to get back in the field about a month ago. So it's an ongoing process. We'll continue to work with concerned residents as this process progresses.
Rob, I have one. Do you know if it develops as retail, how much retail can be built there under the current?
I think it's an FAR of 0.3 or something, so it's a couple 100,000 square feet maybe, based on the acreage.
And that would be allowed under the current comp plan designation?
Under low intensity urban. We did some math on it. I think it was 250,000 square feet of commercial based on the FAR.
That would be allowed today?
I'm sorry?
That's allowed today?
Today, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I might close by maybe heading off some of the responses that would come from me at the pass here. There are some folks who I think have concern about whether they knew that this might be happening. I have a great deal of information that I can share with you. I have a PowerPoint that can lay all that out for you. I'm going to let you guys kind of decide whether you want to hear all that, but I think it's enough for me to tell you that there's been a great deal of notice, written and otherwise, about the fact that this project could happen. That's going to come up in item 10A in a few weeks, or in a couple months. So with that, I'll let you guys decide, but I think some folks are going to talk about that, so I wanted to make sure I had time to respond. Or if you have any questions for me now, certainly.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Merrill? No questions? Okay.
Okay, our first speaker is Stephen Pardell, and on deck is Lori Lombardi.
I'd like to do this. First off, I'd like to thank the commission for...
Mic down, sir. Bring the mic down to your face.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me, we'll start my 2.5 minutes now. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come up here and talk to you and consider my words. I'm not a homeowner in Margaritaville. I'm a citizen who's lived here since 1963, and I've seen great change. I prepared a statement. I'll read it as concisely as I can. Forgive me if I'm a little nervous. Great cities, I wish I had my glasses. Pardon me. Great cities recognize treasures and maximize for the common good. I hope we can do that today. This land appears to be landlocked and only desirable if you grant rezoning. You have that power. I implore you to maximize and protect this environmental and sensitive area until the citizens of Daytona Beach can realize its potential can realize its potential. You may not know it now, but you may need it later. For this unique ecosystem, we might put a teaching center there like Ormond Beach has done on Fleming Avenue. This is one example of what the land might be used for in the future. It is environmentally sensitive land. It's quite unique and one of a kind. It is the only one we have, and with all due respect, I would remind you that we have lost many things over these years. The foresight hasn't always been wise. But if we lose this, and it's gone forever. The animals don't have egress, ingress, can't go north or south. We live right on top of the river, and we lose it. We don't get it back. And then the sprawl continues westward to where there is no river. We don't get another chance for this. This is the one and only. Minto wishes to encroach upon the land closer than they need to. They've already taken thousands of acres. Why give them this little swath of land that's so important to the citizens of Daytona Beach and our children? Thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate that, and I hope you'll consider my words wisely.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lori Lombardi, and on deck is Corey Trusty.
Hi, I have prepared a little note so that I can read it, because otherwise I could probably talk for quite a long time on this topic. But before I begin, I would like to address beforehand what was just said by the people who work for Minto or are backing them up. I, for one, have never heard anything about retail going in that area. And yes, there are people who support this. However, many of those people do not live in the community yet, as you can see by the emails that were sent. And many of them do not live in phase 2, where it will be mostly affected. So I just want to make sure that I have my say in what, as a resident, what I have seen and heard to this point. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the plan to amend the land that is 0.5 miles west of Interstate 95 and north and east of Timber Creek Road. I am totally against this occurring, my main reason being I live on Lost Shaker Way. Amending this land creates exuberant issues for residents on this street as well as many others. As a pro-environmentalist, this amendment would disturb the wildlife that remains as well as the entire balance of the conservation land. If you are not aware, there are gopher tortoises that live there and are environmentally protected. This needs to be addressed. Another main reason is safety. If this were to occur, there would be one way in and one way out. Although it is said that there are 2 ways in, those 2 ways are actually 2 streets, Lost Shaker Way and Compass Rose, that would enter into that community, thus being no access road out of the community. This would now have, and I'm not even sure now because I didn't quite understand what they were saying, because I thought that it was going to be 500, but now there's 119, there's 500. I don't know how many homes they're planning to build there, but again, if there was an emergency, such as an evacuation, there would be one way in and one way out for at least 1,500 people.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm done. Yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker is Corey Trusty, and on deck is Morris Davis.
Good evening. My name is Corey Trusty. Developers continue to say that there will be no impact to waterways, but creating artificial ponds and streets is disruptive to water recharge areas. Volusia County zoning originally designated the majority of this property as a resource corridor, defining that this type of development should not occur unless there's 25 acres per home, because it would be detrimental otherwise. The city of Daytona has implicitly acknowledged that this property is a resource corridor by newly adding a bear crossing sign within a few hundred yards of the property. There's been so much overdevelopment that it's driving animals out of that area. There are so many development or overdevelopment projects going on right now that local environmental groups are overwhelmed, having a hard time keeping up with attending meetings to address all of them. Notwithstanding, 250 concerned citizens have signed my petition against this ordinance. I emailed the commissioners and the mayor a copy of my petition today. You have it in your email box along with the original zoning map from Volusia County. So that narrow strip that the city of Daytona deemed as environmentally sensitive is significantly smaller from the zone that was designated as a resource corridor by Volusia County. So who designated that narrow strip? Who downgraded this property to make it less significant? Okay, that question hasn't been answered. And I'd also like to say that I object to all the developers having more time than citizens, because I have a degree in biology and zoology. The developers keep coming and saying there's no impact, there's no impact. but they do not have the expertise in animal habitat. Animals need more than just water. They need shelter, they need places to hide, and when you tear apart a habitat, they don't have that. Just today, there's development going on Mason Ave, and I saw a soft-shelled tortoise this big at the side of the road. My husband and I turned around our car. We picked up the tortoise and delivered it across the street to a tiny little gutter, real pond. For this.
Go ahead, Kim. And our final speaker on this item is Mr. Morris Davis.
Thank you all for the opportunity to speak. And I also am a resident of Margaritaville, and we've heard that the majority of people out there are in favor of this. No one that I've talked to on my side of the city is. I live on the west side. I live on Lost Shaker, which is the only access to this road, this property. My real concern with this approval, you are approving a landlocked piece for future development. If the developer wants to put something on it, they should also be including ingress and ingress on it. Right now, the only access to this property is in front of my house. And if the process will allow me, I'd like to submit a picture in front of my house from the developer in today's environment, which does not include the land development for this new property. We also heard about it's a small portion of this protected land, but when you look at the maps for it, it's going to be 50 foot of boundary, then houses, and then more, and it's all right in the middle. So we're disrupting the environment in the middle of it with no path for the animals to go anywhere. Now, I know this is separately from 10F, which is where I'd like to comment, but by approving this, you are giving tacit approval for amendment for property 10F, because this has no meaning to anybody unless the development that's in 10F is approved. And it would include access through our existing neighborhood. We heard there's 2 accesses to it, and the future development. Well, Compass Road comes off of Lost Shaker Way. So there's only one access at one point for over half of it, and then it winds out. So there's only one access to this property. And so unless the developer changes this to get egress and ingress to it and puts all the development in one end so the animals can be protected, you are disrupting both the environment and you're also tacitly approving an amendment that has many objections to it. And I still continue to say that what you've been told that the majority of people out there want it, we don't. And especially in its current environment. It's the traffic, it's the development, and the change of the environment that we object to. Thank you.
And that was my final speaker on the item.
Okay, does any member of the commission wish to speak to this item?
Actually, Mr. Merrill is back for rebuttal, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rob?
Yeah, I want to reserve just a couple of minutes to respond in fairness to the folks that took the time to come speak today. Okay, Mayor?
Yes, please be respectful.
That's our normal protocol, I think. Yeah. Just want to say a couple things. First of all, I appreciate the folks coming out, and I appreciate all the folks who sent you emails in support of the request tonight. And I appreciate, and I know you know that these things are done in different compartments. This particular compartment is pretty straightforward. I think some of the comments that were raised have to do with the PD zoning and the plan for development of the property. I can tell you that we probably ought to make sure we have dinner before we have the second reading on this one, because I think folks will come out and they'll want to talk about a lot more detail than what's before you tonight. But very simply, the reason why your planning board's here with the recommendation of approval, as is your staff, is based on the way Dennis described it to you. This is very straightforward. It's got a urban land use that we're changing to residential. The environmental piece of this is exactly the same as it is now. We're not changing anything as it relates to the first future land use for environmental. When we come in and talk to you about the development plan, I think you're going to find the same result, but we're not talking about it tonight. Very simply, exactly the same as it was before from an environmental standpoint. From a use standpoint, commercial allowances now go away, residential solely with a limitation to less than 2 units per acre, which is less than Margaritaville has now. Any questions for me as a result of the comments? Thanks.
All right, commission members, does anyone have a comment to this item?
I have quite a bit concern about the environmentally sensitive area. Like they said, the animals need not only water, they need regular habitat. And I also don't like the idea that they don't seem to have enough entrance and exits. We know ourselves what happens when there's a hurricane and everybody wants to get out of Dodge, so to speak. And it's congestion all over the place. I really wish they would go ahead and rework this so that it seems like it's a better fit. I think we're getting overbuilt in many places. I have concern about the availability of water, especially if we go through a drought season like we do before. I would rather have the water from the aquifer or something similar than have to treat it. I wish they would come back with a better thing. I don't feel comfortable about this. Like somebody said, once it's gone, it's gone. And I'd rather vote no now and maybe yes later on than yes now and regret it later.
Understandable. Anyone else? Next.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned, this is a very narrow request that's before us tonight for a comp plan change. Looking at the uses out there, and I think about where this could go to 250,000 square feet of retail or be single-family residential. I think this is a reasonable request to let move forward. This isn't the last bite at the apple. This will come back, at the end of September, provided it gets through the Growth Management Commission and the Department of Economic Opportunity. But, this is, once again, on first reading, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't let it move forward through the process. I think that single-family residential makes a lot more sense than putting retail on that particular piece of property. I do appreciate the fact that they are leaving, all of the environmentally sensitive property that's defined today intact with their application. So, once again, I'm fine with moving it forward.
Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner? Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, just to remind everyone, this did pass Planning Board 4-2.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead. If there's no other comments, then we will have a vote. Got a motion? Got a second?
Yeah.
Any other comments from the applicants? None, no questions? Okay. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign.
No.
No.
Okay. I think we might better take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Delgado?
I vote aye.
Aye. Commissioner May? Aye. Commissioner Gilliland?
Yes.
Commissioner Henry? No. Commissioner Reed?
No.
Commissioner Traeger?
No.
Mayor Derek L. Henry?
Yes.
Okay. So it passes 4-3. And the public hearing for this item will be September 23rd.
All right, with that being said, I do want to make clarification that as far as I'm concerned, this is first read and this is a customary of us to extend items forward on first read. So we will have some work to do before we get to second read. All right, go ahead, Ms. LaMagna.
Okay. And we're going to move on to the addendum item that was added to tonight's agenda. That is 9G. That's the Legal Department Emergency Ordinance regarding face coverings, regulation, and penalties. This is an emergency ordinance public hearing. An emergency ordinance providing for non-criminal enforcement and penalties for violations of the city's emergency order, mandating facial coverings in indoor locations, providing for applicability and conflict, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments?
I have no speakers for this item.
And this
Okay.
is to put penalties in place for the not wearing a mask?
Yeah, if I might explain, just so it's clear to the public what you're voting on. This is an emergency ordinance in order to revise the potential penalties that can be imposed for failure to wear a mask. As I'm sure you know, by Resolution 2020-185, you imposed a mask requirement for indoor spaces within the city. Under the authority to pass that emergency resolution, which is under Chapter 252 Florida statutes, the only potential penalty is for a second-degree misdemeanor. It's criminal. At one of the prior meetings recently, it was suggested that perhaps we should not impose criminal penalties, and you'd ask legal to come back with some options. This is the option. We're doing this through an emergency ordinance in order to utilize your home rule power. The fines that are imposed here for a first offense are non-criminal. They're civil fines, $25 for a first offense, $50 for a second offense, and $100 for a third offense and subsequent offenses. The emergency ordinance would require, prior to issuance of the citation, that the individual be asked to comply and be given the opportunity to explain why they may fall into an exception to the mask requirement, such as they have a medical condition, which makes it difficult for them to utilize the mask. So that's essentially it. It is an emergency ordinance, so it does require 5 votes instead of 4 in order to pass. The supermajority.
Mr. Mayor, my thought is that if you're given an opportunity to explain yourself and put on a mask to avoid it, then maybe the initial penalty can be more than $25, because it seems like the administrative, there's a cost having to administer all this, and is someone really going to want to administer a $25 fine? I'm not generally in favor of punishing people more. Obviously, we want compliance. My second question is, Bob, isn't there, like, when people do, they take their animals on the plane and they have a special companion animal or something? I thought there were rules about asking people or making people kind of defend their companion animal. It's like an ADA issue. Is there a similar issue if people have to affirmatively kind of say why they don't have to wear a mask? Are there any issues like that we have to worry about?
Well, certainly those issues can be raised. My personal opinion is that you have expansive authority under 252 to impose these emergency requirements, and that the provisions in this resolution and this emergency ordinance could be defended.
Okay. I think if we're going to have it, I know a lot of people don't want to have this ordinance, but if we're going to have it, and it has to have some meaningful enforcement thing, I just think $25 is not worth the time it's going to take to enforce it, if in fact we really enforce it. So I think the fact that people are given an opportunity to cure it and then to explain why they shouldn't have to wear it or they can't wear it, I think the first fine should be, something that's, $50, $100, something that's actually not going to cost us money to administer. But that's really my only objection. I hope that no one ever gets, cited under this power. I hope we never have to, punish anyone for doing this, and I hope that we just get compliance or an understanding as to why that person can't comply with the request. But I would recommend that we make the initial fine higher than $25. This is just my input.
I have a question about this. I'm trying to understand the application here. So somebody walks into a store or building, they don't wear their mask, they're asked to put their mask on, they say they don't have one, they're offered a mask, they still refuse, but they still want to utilize the service. They could just walk out, correct? And everything is done.
Yeah.
Is that what we're thinking right here? I'm imagining someone standing around waiting for a citation. I'm trying to imagine that happening right now. Now, we know I'm pro-mask, but I'm just wondering how we're going to do this. So if the person leaves, then it's all done. They just walk out of the building.
If a person fails to cooperate with the lawful duties of an officer, that is a separate offense.
Okay. All right, so I'm understanding. I'm just trying to get a picture here. So the picture is, person goes to a store. They walk into the store. They don't want to wear a mask, even though that's the ordinance. The shop clerk says, put one on or you're going to have to leave. The person refuses to leave. they call the police, let's say. Under that condition, is that what we're looking at?
If the police arrive and they continue to refuse to wear the mask, they would be subject to the fine.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I think under this, you would almost have,
Go ahead.
I mean, you would have to be intentionally, I mean, you would have to be trying to make a point to run afoul of this ordinance. I mean, I think that's the point. I mean, you have so many opportunities to, you know, defuse the situation, you know, go somewhere else, do something else. And I think we're giving a tremendous amount of opportunities for people to avoid running afoul of this. But I mean, obviously, if a police officer is investigating that and you resist it or something like that, that would be a separate problem. I mean, I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable with the idea of having a punishment for this because we have so many opportunities for people to avoid the punishment right there at the scene without having to, you know, go to court or anything like that. I mean, I think Commissioner May is kind of pointing out that this is a very narrow thing, and there's not a lot of situations in which people are really going to be in jeopardy of violating this unless they go out of their way to do it as some sort of, you know, principled protest or something like that.
And Commissioner May, I guess to further address your point, the store owner could trespass that individual as well. So they could refuse service based upon the failure to wear a mask. But that's a private matter, not involving the...
Okay, so I just want to be double sure. So shop owners could actually request the person leave, and they're within rights to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Where are we right now with regard to the citation? So it's citation, opportunity, $50 fine. Is that where we are right now? 50, 75, 100, or 50 to 100? Where are we in the numbers?
Well, the numbers, as you know, we drafted it, are actually based on what was done in DeLand and Orange City. It's $25 first offense, 50 second, and 100 third. But you're, of course, at liberty to change those.
And is the first time a warning? Is the first time a warning? Just a basic warning? No.
No, they've already had 2 weeks of warning.
4 warnings.
The current state of your emergency resolution provided for warnings up until today's date, and following today's date, there'll be second-degree misdemeanors unless you make this change.
But you'd still have the warning in the sense that the officer would say, you know, please put on your mask. If you don't do that, then this is going to become, you know, something else, right? I mean, is that what you mean, Commissioner May, as far as a warning? I mean, there's still a warning before it becomes...
It just seems, I agree with you, it seems that there are multiple opportunities to still comply or leave. You're being given ample opportunity to make a decision, and then you're deciding not to do that. Okay?
Yeah, I think the only way that happens is if you say, I object to wearing masks and I want to challenge the city's authority, or I want to challenge this for whatever reason because it's a principled position or you think it's a legal position or something. I just can't imagine. That would be like, you know, being stopped for not wearing your seatbelt, being told just put it on, and then persisting and arguing, and then getting a $25 ticket. I mean, I just think like I think there's ample opportunity to diffuse the situation, and I don't see that this would be used to punish people. The average person would find a way to diffuse the situation well before it got to the point where they're going to face any of the financial consequences. So I just think that first consequence needs to be more than $25, just because I don't think $25 is, I mean, it probably cost us hundreds of dollars to enforce that one instance, you know, so I don't want to lose even more money because someone is not cooperating with what we've asked them to do, and then we're going to waste, you know, taxpayer dollars enforcing something for $25. I think that first fine needs to be more representative of what it would actually cost us to just, you know, issue the fine. That's all I'm saying.
I think in the last 2 weeks, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, no, go ahead, Commissioner.
In the last 2 weeks, when we have asked individuals or folks to wear their masks, I've seen more masks being worn. I had a doctor's appointment on yesterday, and she was emphasizing that if people don't wear their mask, they're saying that they don't care about you. Because the whole point of wearing the mask is so that if I am asymptomatic, I don't give it to you. And she said, you know, that you just have to be conscientious of that. I'm okay with these fees. I really don't think we're going to have a problem. And I don't think anybody's going to wait around and wait for a police officer to come to give them a ticket for $25. I mean, when you can easily walk away and it's resolved. So I think what if anything, this is just going to be maybe placeholders to let them know that we do have the authority to do something if something needs to be done, if it escalates and they don't leave. But I'm all right with these fines. I didn't want it to be a misdemeanor and get all out of hand and become something that we didn't necessarily want to have it to be.
So what is the fee going to be? Is it going to be 25 or 50 as Commissioner Delgado suggests?
Right now, it's 25, 50, 100, unless somebody makes a motion to change it.
Commissioner Delgado? I'm okay with changing it. I think $25 is too low.
Yeah, I don't know what it actually, when I get the cost of prosecution affidavits in my business, I think it's like $20 an hour or something like that. Is sometimes I see those numbers as just the kind of behind the scenes processing costs. So I mean, I think this is going to take more than an hour of clerical time to resolve. So I think, you know, $50 or $75 for the first one, and then, you know, maybe 50, 100, 200 or something like that is a more reasonable scale. I just think that initial one, $25 just doesn't seem, well, I think that people would, we would lose money, not even break even on doing that, and we would be the ones who kind of ultimately lose out on that. And I don't want to put in a penalty that's going to actually cost us to enforce. So I just think, you know, I don't know if there's anyone that can give us some guidance on what it would cost to actually enforce a citation, but I think $50 is a bare minimum starting place. So I'd make a motion to amend the schedule to start at $50 and then $100 and then $150 after that.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a second.
Okay, and who was that?
Henry.
May?
Second.
Okay, we have a second, okay. Do we have any opposition to that? Okay,
Yeah, I, in opposition?
yes,
Me,
Ditto.
okay.
5-2.
All right, well, okay. Well, I guess we have.
I don't want it to, I'm sorry, I mean, I don't want it to be a deal breaker. I mean, if you know, if it's going to cause the overall ordinance or the overall vote to not pass tonight, that's not my goal. My goal is not to cause the problem to be over the fine. So, I mean, Commissioner Gilliland, is that going to change your, I mean, just having the higher fine change your support of or your position on the masks?
No.
No, I don't think we should be criminalizing this. I mean, it's technically not, but, you know, the effect here is I think we're giving people a false sense of security. And I don't think it's something that we should be regulating in this way. You know, I think you're going to see there's a huge change that's going to start tomorrow, because Walmart's going to require nationwide to enter the store, you have to wear a mask. That's meaningful. What we're doing is not, which is why I did not support the mask mandate in the first place, and I won't be supporting either fine schedule tonight.
I have a question. Is there another way we can do this? You mentioned the trespass, the trespass ordinance. This gives the shop owner the right to decide to call the police because they want the person to leave because they're not wearing the mask, correct? So they could be trespassed? Is that how it would work?
That's the way it would work. They could be trespassed from Walmart, for instance. If a customer refused to wear the mask, and then Walmart could trespass that person.
And that would not involve a fine, but they could call the police. The police could enforce a trespass type ordinance because that's just legally the owner is asking you to leave. So is that another way of getting this done?
Yes.
Which puts the responsibility on the owner of the store?
Correct.
Okay.
But Bob, if we did not have a mask mandate and the store had a private policy of wearing a mask and they did not wear a mask, it would be the exact same scenario.
Exactly.
Once again, what we're doing doesn't accomplish anything. So.
Well, we are able to say to the stores, as I said in the emergency order, that they have to post a sign. And I would like to have a discussion on, future penalties for stores that don't post a sign. I do think we need to send a message. He's saying it doesn't do anything. Well, some of the stores are intimidated by people who choose not to wear their mask. Many of the store owners are asking for us to impose a fine. So I think we need to do our part also and not just leave it all to the store.
And Mr. Mayor, I do believe masks do serve a purpose. I just don't believe that what we're doing is something that will have a meaningful effect on the outcome. This has been going on for a couple of weeks, and we're not seeing the numbers flatten. They've done nothing but climb since people started putting mask mandates in place.
So, and as a business owner, my position is that as a business owner, I get to decide who I want to service. And so my policy is that I'm going to service people who are behaving a certain way when they come into my place of business, right? And my clients are choosing to come because I'm behaving a certain way. So what would the effect be if we allowed the individual business to make that decision and then service the people that wanted to behave that way? Because it seems like it's a split between who wants to and who doesn't. I recognize, and God knows, I have been embracing, public health since the very beginning. I support the mask ordinance. But, at some level, people have to take personal responsibility for their health. And if people want to be sick, they can be sick, and we protect the ones that we can, and that's where we are right now.
Commissioner Ray, the way I see this is kind of like, I have a staff member who got COVID-19, and she's probably the biggest proponent now of all the safety measures we have in our office because, she didn't ask to get it. She was kind of exposed to it, obviously, and her life was really turned upside down by it. So to me, I feel like I'm protecting my staff. When someone comes in, my receptionist or someone might not have the comfort level to say, hey, you have to put on a mask. They might want to come and get me. And I don't think that I should have to, I don't think that I want to protect my staff. And I think that that's kind of what the mayor is saying. There's a lot of businesses who are scared that if they do that or they put that on their employee, it's not going to happen or they're going to have a negative consequence to that. So I think it's okay for us as the government to be kind of the boogeyman in this situation and take some of the blame off the small business owners. But I think what Commissioner Gilliland is pointing out, and I think what the city attorney is pointing out is you could always refuse service to anyone, like no shirt, no shoes, no service. I mean, I could tell anyone if you come in you don't wear purple in my office, I'm not going to take your case. I mean, you could always do that. And if someone doesn't, if you ask someone to leave and they don't, you could always have them trespassed. So that remedy is going to exist regardless of what we do here with masks, no masks. You could trespass anyone who doesn't voluntarily leave your property. So, I mean, that will always be the case. But I think that we as the government should kind of step in and say, we're not going to make the small business that might not want to risk alienating a customer or an employee or a person who might feel uncomfortable speaking up. I think it's okay for us to take that on ourselves in this extraordinary period of time. So I think that's part of what this ordinance does is gives a small business kind of a shield to stand behind so they don't have to be the bad guy. And I'm okay with being the bad guy in this circumstance because I think that's what the emails that I've gotten from a lot of businesses have suggested. I've gotten emails from people who hate the idea. Those are almost all individuals. And I've gotten emails from people asking us to enforce it. And those are almost all business owners who I think would rather, the city be the heavy in this case. So that's where I'm kind of coming from in this because I agree with what Commissioner Reed was saying, that to some extent, what we're asking is for you to be considerate and courteous of other people. And when you go into a business, those employees are kind of hostages. They don't have the opportunity to just get up and leave, or, they may not feel like they can individually refuse service. They may be, a 16-year-old kid working at Publix or working their first job or something, and they don't want to, earn the ire of a customer or lose their job or something. So to me, I think this is the role of government sometimes, is to be the bad guy. And I agree, we don't have the power and the authority of Walmart. And Walmart can change the world much more quickly than we can. But I think that it's still meaningful for the government to, in this case, kind of set out that that's our value and that's what we think should happen within the city. So I'll be supporting the mask ordinance. I don't care what the fine level is. I care more about the message we're sending. So if the fine level is going to cause anyone who would otherwise have supported it tonight to not support it, then I'd withdraw my motion. That was my purpose of asking Commissioner Gilliland that.
Aaron, the mask mandate is already in place. It passed weeks ago. The only thing we're talking about right now is what are you guys going to make the fines?
Right.
Yeah, everything you just talked about, you voted for a couple weeks ago.
And the other,
Right,
my issue with it is just general enforcement. So the practical side of things does in fact matter to me, right? So again, I'm envisioning calling the police, person standing there, the question is, will they enforce it? Is it enforceable? Is it aspirational? If it's aspirational, then that's what it is. I mean, this would be an extreme situation of somebody ever getting a fine. And I mean, would the police actually do this? Would they in fact enforce it? I mean, that's been the question along, and you know, Chief Capri has said that he has a position on that. So where does that leave it? And I'm having this conversation because now's the time to actually address these things before we go forward, right? I do support the mask ordinance 100%, but it's the practical side that I'm concerned about.
Well, from my position, people, if we're saying that people need to wear masks, then that should be the expectation of our law enforcement. If that's what we say, we expect them to wear a mask, then they should expect them to wear a mask, and that should be expected. If push comes to shove, then they should be expected to enforce that. And that's my position. That's what I expect. Now, if we don't say we don't want masks, then that's understandable. Now, we're not asking you to go out and look for people and just look for trouble. We understand the challenge of enforcing a mask. But we also, we need to make a statement, and we need to encourage people and help. And this is pushing down the line. This is pushing it. You know, I see where, I guess the governor in North Carolina made it a $1,000 fine for every infraction. I mean, and that's not where people want to go, but it is a proven fact that if people wear their mask and they stand back from one another and they wash their hands, the virus does decrease. And that's just a
proven fact that people stand back from one another and wash their hands, the virus decreases. The mask part is just
it's more of a fact, though, if you add all three of them together. You know, and that's what the science is saying, and we can argue that, but that's what the scientists are telling us, that it's better to wear a mask. And so that's what I want to support that in whatever ways I think we can as a government. So I guess we're just determining now between $25 and $50. I'm in favor of $50. If we have 4 votes for $50 fines, I'm good with that. If we only have 4 votes for $25 fines, I'm good with that. But I do support the fine.
You already asked for those opposed, and it was Reed and I. No one else was opposed, so it passed 5-2 to make it 50, 100, 150.
I don't know that we actually took a vote.
No, we didn't take a vote.
Opposed.
Only 2 people said that. I just said who was opposed. I was really asking for them to acknowledge whether they wanted to speak against the issue. But we can go ahead. I'd rather just take a vote.
Yeah, we have pending the motion to amend the main motion to revise the fine schedule from 25 to 50 for a first offense, and from 50 to 100 for a second, and from 100 to 150 on the third offense. If that passes, or even if it doesn't, you'll still have to vote on the main motion, either amended or not. And I should add, if you don't pass on the main motion, then the penalty will be a second-degree misdemeanor under your previous resolution. Just so we're all clear.
I don't know if we're all clear. So we're voting now for the fine to be 50, 100, 150, 150, 200? What is that?
50, 100, 150, I believe.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second to vote on. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
So the motion carries, I believe, 5-2.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And now for procedure, what are we voting on, the original?
Now we'll need a motion to pass the ordinance as amended.
Or do we take the original motion as amended? It was Commissioner Gilliland and Commissioner May.
We have the revised motion now, so you're voting on the revised motion as amended.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay, we're voting on the revised motion as amended. All right, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries, I suppose, 6-1.
6-1 to approve the ordinance as amended.
Yeah.
Are you're
Or you're
against
nay?
the 50, 100, 150? Okay. So
Okay, so then it was 5-2.
Oh, 5-2?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to move on to item 10, which is our administrative items. Item 10A is the Development and Administrative Services Planning Division, CLOR, rezoning to Plan Development General. This is an ordinance on first reading. An ordinance amending the zoning map of the Land Development Code to rezone 260 plus or minus acres of property generally located 0.5 miles west of Interstate 95 and north and east of Timber Creek Road from BC Volusia County zoning to City PDG Plan Development General District, approving the CLOR Plan District Agreement, authorizing the future expansion of the Latitude Margaritaville subdivision to include an additional 500 dwelling units and 10,000 square feet of private amenities, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute the agreement, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, well, that was a slow motion, slow second. So do we have any discussion from the staff? I mean, from the commission?
This is just to move it forward to the public hearing in September.
Yeah, correct. It's first read, but I just want to make sure we had another item which I felt was the same thing, but it didn't turn out quite the same way. So do we have any comments about this? If not, that motion got a second. If there's no comment, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same
No.
sign.
No.
So
I believe it was 4-3 with Commissioner Reed, Henry, and Traeger, the nays.
okay, all right. That it is customary that all items on first read go through the second read, but that is so. This is the first that I've seen since I've been in this chair that happened. But that's certainly you're right.
I should remind the commission that it is more than customary. They're entitled to the second reading, which is a quasi-judicial hearing. So technically, we would need to move these forward
Okay.
to meet their due process rights.
And the public hearing is scheduled for September 23rd.
And so I want to make it clear to the public that this is by no means a given. These are not given items. They are as our attorney says, it is not only procedure, but it is basically mandatory that these move forward. We really don't have a option in that. So that being said, you may carry on, Ms. LaMagna.
Okay. Moving on to item 10B, it's the Development Administrative Services Planning Division, Land Development Code Text Amendment, amending Table 5.2.8.3 of the LDC. This is an ordinance on first reading. An ordinance amending the Land Development Code, amending Article 5, Section 5.2.8.3, Principal Use Table for redevelopment districts to add a place of worship as a permitted use within the RDM2 Neighborhood Center Mixed Use Zoning District, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
Well, I have a motion. I don't know if I have a second.
Who first? Who was the first?
I believe Commissioner Delgado.
Delgado?
Motion.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay. All right. Do we have questions on this item?
Actually, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
The question is Mr. Merrill still here? Maybe not? Okay. Regarding the place of worship, I'd like to understand how they're using it. They said it says a neighborhood center mixed use. I just wanted some more clarification on that.
Dennis, would you mind?
So it's not solely it's not solely a place of worship.
I'm Dennis Merrill, the planning director. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you clearly.
How is this facility going to be used exactly? It's going to be a church?
Well, for this particular request, it would allow the place of worship within this RDM2 zoning district. There is a specific location that we had an applicant come forward to look to put a place of worship in there into that zoning district. The zoning district already permits other types of places of assembly, and to keep in compliance with the federal regulations on religious institutions, we have modified or are requesting to modify the code to add the places of worship to be consistent with the RLUIPA Act.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, we had a motion and a second. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
And just for the record, Commissioner Gilliland stepped out, so it'll be 6-0. I don't know if you can see that.
No.
And the public hearing is set for August 5th. Moving on to item 10C, it's the Development and Administrative Services Planning Division, Land Development Code Text Amendment, RDD 7, signage. This is an ordinance on first reading. An ordinance amending the Land Development Code, amending Table 6.10.K.6.B of the Land Development Code, the district sign schedule for redevelopment downtown districts, to add sign regulations for the redevelopment downtown local business services RDD 7 district, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
The public hearing is set for August 5th. Moving on to 10D, it's the Development and Administrative Services Planning Division, Williamson Hand, rezoning to Plan Development General, PDG. This is an ordinance on first reading. An ordinance amending the zoning map of the Land Development Code to rezone 32.3 plus or minus acres of property generally located in the southeast quadrant of Williamson Boulevard and Hand Avenue intersection from Volusia County R2 Urban Single Family to City PDG Plan Development General, approving the Williamson Hand Plan District Agreement to allow for the mixed-use development of the property, including residential and commercial uses, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute the agreement, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing an effective date.
So moved. So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments? All right, the motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
The public hearing is set for August 5th. Moving on to item 10E, it's the Budget Division Fiscal Year 2020-21 Proposed Tentative Millage Rate Resolution, a resolution authorizing the notification to the property appraiser for advertising purposes, the City of Daytona Beach Fiscal Year 2020-2021 proposed tentative operating millage rate of 5.5300, the current rollback millage rate of 5.5357, the voted debt service millage rate of 0.2543, the first public hearing date of September 9, 2020 on the tentative millage rate in the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, and providing an effective date.
So moved.
All right, thank you. I finally got a motion. I think that's two of them, so.
Fred's standing here, and I wasn't sure if he was going to talk first or.
Hard to talk in the mask. This is just, by state law, by August 4th, we have to tell the property appraiser for this information so that they can mail it to the property owners in Daytona Beach. So we have to set it whatever millage rate you want. The resolution has those numbers in it. And the reason for September 9th is because the state schedule for the first public hearing does not allow us to have a meeting the first Wednesday because it's so early in September this year. So we're moving, the plan is to move both meetings to the 2nd and 4th in September.
So Fred, the proposal is to be slightly below rollback?
That is the proposal.
And I always call this the not to exceed number. We can always go lower.
It is possible to exceed it, but it takes a lot of hoops to jump through.
But it's, you know, I think it sends a good message that there will absolutely not be a tax increase in Daytona Beach this year. Granted, it's marginally below rollback, but I think it sends a good message to the community that this is, you know, where we're starting, and hopefully we'll find something actually even a little below where the 5.53.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the manager because after Commissioner Gilliland made mention of the tax rate, I did ask him to try to start us at this point. And so if you start at this point, you can't go up, so we will have a tax decrease. And so hopefully, as he said, we can find a little bit more. The one thing we don't want to do during this time is to pass on any more of a burden to our residents and small businesses and large businesses as well than we have to. We do still have services that we must provide and priorities that we have to meet. But let's see if we can squeeze a little bit more to give just a little bit more to our residents. But thanks for being able to show that we could start here. I think it reflects, you know, the good stewardship that we've shown over the last several years of our resources to be at a position that we could do this, as well as the position we were in earlier, to be able to give the stimulus to small businesses, residents, and those are our partners like the Tortugas and Zipline and others. So let's continue, staff, see if we can take it down even more to let the residents know that we're in this with them. Do you have any other comments from the commission? Oh, okay. We have a motion and a second. There are no other comments. We'll take a vote. All those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Now move on to item 10F, which is the City Manager's Office Code Enforcement Board appointment resolution. A resolution appointing one member to the Code Enforcement Board to fill a term ending August 23rd, 2021. This agenda item is to appoint one member to the Code Enforcement Board to replace Mr. Josh Brogerty, who had resigned from membership term expiring August 23rd, 2021. We have one application from Mr. Eugene Robinson.
Motion to appoint Eugene Robinson.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Do you have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be noted by saying aye.
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 Those in opposition, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
And moving on to our final item of the agenda is the discussion item on the City Code Amendment for Chapter 94, Article 8, Bicycles, Section 94.
Shall I start?
Who's going to go ahead?
Okay, thank you. All right, so, you know, this is an issue that's been going on in Zone 3, and it's been a bit of a problem. I've been receiving emails from business people regarding this problem, and the issue is that they're being struck by the scooters. Today I spent a good portion of my afternoon speaking to a merchant who represents other merchants on the ocean side. I spoke with GoX, who is the company who rents the scooters. I spoke with the gentleman who was considering bringing the scooters into his property. And then I spoke to another gentleman also involved with the scooters. So I went full circle with this, and at the end of it, the person I'd like to speak with is Captain Lee, because he's actually been directly involved in this. So between the two of us, we've been fielding a lot of calls. So Captain Lee, could you briefly describe the situation right now as you're seeing it, since you're the one who's dealing with enforcement and any complaints?
Yes, ma'am. Scott Lee, I'm a district patrol captain for the police department. The issue that we're having is the scooters are being routinely left in common spaces on sidewalks. We're receiving a lot of phone calls, a lot of communication from our business owners that Some of them, their businesses, their doorways abut the sidewalk, so you have customers that are exiting those businesses, and they're being confronted by these scooters riding down those areas at about 20 miles an hour or more. The issue that we're finding from the police department side is that we've told the company to stop, that they're not complying. We've asked them to come in and meet with the city to discuss a way, if there's a way to come to a plan that would work for our city and our design. They've been reluctant to do that. They made some attempts at the beginning, but when asked to explain some stuff and how it would work, that communication kind of ceased. And they, throughout that process, never ceased the activity itself. They started partnering with some of the local businesses. Feel a little bad for them. They were a little disingenuous with them, I believe. And ultimately, we've had to address these issues with those local businesses through code enforcement and other means to address this as well. The big issue and the biggest impact for us from the police department standpoint is that we're having to have officers go out almost every weekend now and impound or seize, or I should say, collect. So we're collecting the abandoned ones that are on public property or private not private property, but public right of way. So if they're left abandoned on the boardwalk, for example, they're left abandoned obstructing the sidewalk, they're left in areas such as those, we're collecting those ones that are creating a potential hazard in those areas. Those scooters are being collected and then ultimately taken to our property and evidence area where they're stored and processed through that area until that business owner or the scooter owners contact us to retrieve those items.
As of right now, as it relates to that, are we charging them for that service? Because we're saving them money by collecting their property for them, sort of.
Well,
so how is that working?
Yeah, currently there is no cost to them, other than, I guess, the loss of what would be being collected as revenue from the scooter not being out there. We're collecting them because they're creating a potential hazard and an issue out in those areas for us and for the pedestrians. And sometimes when they're left in these sidewalk areas or these displays overlap onto the sidewalk area, it pushes the pedestrians off the sidewalk and into the roadway to go around that or back onto private property as well.
Okay, so the issue seems to be usage on sidewalks and the fact that we're impounding them, essentially, but there's no fee attached to it. Is there anything we can do about that, Mr. Jagger?
So the problem we have from a legal perspective is that the code is really silent with regard to these new mobility devices that we're seeing in the marketplace. We've addressed this issue, as Captain Lee has stated, through our land development code. We've required store owners to comply with the code, meaning that they can't utilize our sidewalk for their business operations. They have to lease these units from within the store, and they have to be returned to the store after use. That would arguably be a legal use of their property, consistent with, assuming it's consistent with their zoning. So the issue has arisen mostly, I think, with regard to operator issues, meaning they're being left on the sidewalks, there's pedestrian safety issues, and what legal has done, what my office has done, is to go through various other jurisdictions and see how they've been handled elsewhere. There's a lot of very recent developments as far as regulation from other local jurisdictions. Most were adopted in 19, prior to the COVID issues. I have given you, as part of your backup, several examples from other jurisdictions. I've also drafted a sample based on St. Petersburg, but there are a lot of options to you. That's why this is a discussion item. I was hoping to get further direction from you if you wish to regulate in this area. If you choose not to regulate in this area, then essentially these devices can be anywhere, subject to state regulations where they're treated like bicycles. So they have to follow the rules of the road just as a bicycle would under state law. But we currently have no regulations concerning their operation on sidewalks. So just to throw out a few options, maybe to start the conversation. You could do very minimal regulation. You could have simple regulations in terms of their operation. You can govern their speed. You can govern how they're parked, require that they not block the sidewalk, and just address the operational standpoints. That's probably the minimal level of regulation you could provide. From there, you could go further, and you could regulate the micro mobility providers, the people that are leasing these from their businesses. And again, you can require them to be permitted, to be licensed or franchised And in that way, you can have a greater knowledge of what's occurring on your sidewalks. And, you know, the level of regulation can go on from there in terms of reporting and auditing and so forth. But, and that's where I need your guidance. I need to know how far you want to go in your regulations. The model I gave you, again, is kind of a middle of the road. It requires operational restrictions. And we treat them somewhat like bicycles in the model I gave you with regard to the city's existing code. So your existing regulations on bicycles would prohibit bicycles within your business districts as defined by state law. And if you so choose, you could treat these micro-mobility devices in the same way, so they would be prohibited in those areas on the sidewalks. Or alternatively, you could prohibit them everywhere or come up with some other form of regulation for the providers.
And so, Captain Lee, as you're doing your work in town, what are you finding the major issues are? Is it in the business district? Is it on the sidewalk? What are your thoughts?
The bulk of where they're placing them, or where they're ending up, I should say, I guess, is in the core area of the beach side. You know, that, I guess that kind of makes sense. If we have a lot of tourism in that area. There's a lot of people that want to travel throughout that area to and from the beach. And that's kind of the area where we're dealing with it the most. We've seen a few over in the Beach Street area. But it is a little bit of a burdensome to us. I think, to give you guys an example or some perspective on it, we collected, I think it was 40 scooters just this last weekend. And that's, you know, that's why we're here, trying to figure out what you guys want to do about it.
So one thing to understand about the business model is that they have GPS devices, so the owner always knows where they are. But they also are capable of having a slide for a credit card, so that they could be rented from any point of service. In the draft code that I've given you, they would have to return those to the point of sale. So again, this kind of gets back to the level of regulation. Do you want to have a dockless system, which means they can be left anywhere and rented from that spot where they're left? Or do you want to have a docking requirement for such providers? Or do you want to require them to be returned back to the point of sale? These are all, you know, among
From the
your options.
conversations I've had with GoEx also, they would not have a problem with it being returned to the shop itself. And so that's kind of where I'm headed right now, is that they rent and return to the same place. My biggest concern is the sidewalk issue. I do not want to have motorized vehicles on sidewalks. They pose a definite hazard to our tourist community. Agree?
I'm sorry, what did you say there?
The not being on sidewalks. We want them not in sidewalks.
It does. A lot of our sidewalk areas, especially in that area we just discussed, are very narrow and compared to other cities, and it really does not function very well. And mainly the operators, I guess, based on what we're talking of, what he's proposed to you and some of the options that are there for you, there would be a level of duty on the rider's part to yield to pedestrians, to, you know, avoid collisions, things like that. And that would kind of help us in a way to be able to enforce in some of those areas. But I think from my perspective, if there's a way for the company to govern some of that, like by regulating electronically the speed or geofencing areas, things like that, that would help tremendously on the enforcement side for us.
So during our conversation, geofencing came up. They could actually restrict within a few feet of being in a roadway or a sidewalk. And they said they would have an interest in doing that for us with their software. So they're open to that. As long as they're open to regulating this, I mean, it can continue. But again, safety is a concern of mine. Also, the city and the police department or the code enforcement picking it up and using our resources to help them does not work for me. So I'd like to know our impound fees. What are we charging right now? Do we have a fee set? Because, you know, anywhere from $200 to $300 would be good per unit, actually.
There's no provision currently in the code that allows for us to do that in this case, and that's part of why we're here, to try to start this conversation.
Is it possible to include that?
So it's included in there now in the draft. Of course, any regulation, I think, would have an impound provision consistent with the fee schedule, which you'd need to establish in the future.
And then can you speak to me about the rate of speed, please? Because right now they can go up to 18 miles per hour?
Yeah, for folks that are out there, business owners that are seeing it, it's hard for them to judge speed, and these devices always seem much faster than they're going. I really, we're not standing out there with a radar gun. We don't really know how fast they're going. I've said that I've been told that they don't exceed 20 miles per hour, but of course I've been told by people they feel as though they're going much faster than that. And that would be something that would be very difficult for us to regulate. And I go back to if there's a way to set it so that these micromobility device or sharing companies, ride-sharing companies, are able to regulate that on the back end with software, and there was a way for us to ensure that was happening, I think that would probably help us a lot in the enforcement side.
Yeah, by state law, by definition, they're limited to 20 miles per hour. Sure. Many other jurisdictions reduce the speed limit for these to 15 or 10.
Okay.
I believe it's capable to put a governor on the governor. I've seen regulations that require them to be governed on their speed, so that is an option for you.
What would be a reasonable rate of speed, sir?
I think probably if you're in the ballpark of 15 miles an hour, which I saw in one of the options or examples, and I think that's probably a reasonable speed. It kind of depends on what our intended use in that area is. If it's on a sidewalk, I'm not even sure, 15 miles an hour would be appropriate. So that's kind of you kind of have to decide all that. And part of the issue that city staff has had as we've discussed some of this is that there's just not enough data about how we would implement something like this in our city and how it would be affected by how our city is designed. And that lack of data is kind of made some of this, I guess, a bit of a guessing game, which is why we were trying to get this company to come in and talk to us about what their idea or plan was, and that just never really came to fruition.
What about some of our neighboring cities? How are they regulating them?
To my knowledge, and I've searched Unicode for regulations, none of our neighboring cities have adopted regulations. No.
Daytona Beach Shores doesn't have any?
I'm not aware. I saw a news article with regard to their use there, but I could not find any regulation. So I'm assuming they're handling that administratively. Locally, I have not found any regulations on these micromobility devices. St. Augustine does have a program for regulating them, as do many other jurisdictions, but I think we're kind of new to the game. The company has just started operating in this area.
And my understanding is the Shores is also new to the game, which is probably why they have nothing that we found so far. They're just dealing with the same problem with the same company, and they're obviously working through it however they decide as a city to work through it.
So is this a minimum entry point for us, and do we have the opportunity to add more regulation as this evolves? So let's say hypothetically, let's say they decide to hire people to go and well, they can't do that, can they? They have to return it to the original store. So they shouldn't actually be leaving them anywhere. They should be returning the product to the store.
As an example, what was drafted for you does require that return to the point of sale, but they would be allowed to park on the sidewalk subject to conditions.
Okay.
It must be upright, and it cannot block the sidewalk, and must leave 5 feet for passage.
So would we consider these like a small car? Could they take a parking space, or could they then be on the sidewalk for that?
Well, I think that just like he described, and as I've seen in some of those examples, that if you were to take into account those things, that if they were going, because he's right, the intended use of this is that you rent the device, you use it as you travel from multiple points, you stop, you get off, you go inside a business, and you leave it parked, and then it's there for you to return to and continue to use to another point, and so on and so on. So I think that at that point, yes, it would have to be used in a way where it was providing adequate ingress and egress on the sidewalk. There's enough room for people to walk. It's not blocking, doorways and businesses, and obviously it's not laying down, creating a hazard. That gets a little trickier to enforce because then the question is who's responsible for that. I think would be the
operator of the device would be responsible for that.
So that would become something we would take against that person rather than the entity or the business. Yeah.
And the penalties are treated or could be treated differently. Again, in the example I provided, those operator violations are treated like a traffic ticket.
Right.
Whereas the violations on the providers, on the micromobility device providers, are more serious. They're processed under Section 1-14 of our code like a second-degree misdemeanor.
Have you been able to talk with some of the operators of these, some of the businesses that, like you said, rent these out?
I think staff may have talked to some of the businesses that I have to defer to them.
Yeah, if you're referring to GoX as a company, the company that doesn't actually, they don't physically exist here in Daytona Beach, we have had some phone conversations with them, and I've had some personal interactions with local representatives here, basically the folks who are collecting the scooters and moving them about. My staff has spoke with them, and some of the other city staff has spoke with them as well. The business owners, the local business owners that have been doing it, I think that's one of the problems that's also occurred here, is that they have gone around and tried to display these and pull businesses into doing this where they don't even have the ability under their business tax receipt to even be able to rent these types of devices out. And that has been another challenge that we've had to deal with from the code enforcement side of things. But we do have provisions within our code that allow us to address that and bring that stuff to the magistrate if necessary or the code board.
Would have to get a permit to do this, a license in order to operate this, correct? Business owners.
Well, you have options here again. So you can require every device to be licensed. In the draft I provided, only the devices which are rented would be licensed and would have to be marked with the company that's renting them and have a license sticker issued by the police department.
Okay.
That's a similar process to what we do with pedicabs. I think that's
and bicycles as well.
And would that process work for you, sir? Would that be an efficient way of doing this?
From a law enforcement standpoint, I guess that it would be something visible that immediately showed us that it was inspected and stickered. So I guess, yes, that would help us on that end. I'm not sure how cumbersome that becomes for other departments that, would facilitate that, but.
You do charge a licensing fee and a permitting fee to cover your administrative costs.
Okay.
I've seen these things on A1A, and we don't have the capacity for what these things do. I've seen them laying all over the place because right now there's no ruling that they have to take them back. I think we need to consider, do we even want this? Because I don't think that we, you're saying you don't want them on sidewalks, neither do I. I mean, they almost ran me over and I was just trying to go to the boardwalk. And the fact that we're going around picking them up, and I did see some people in some pickup trucks that probably were representing the company going around and picking them up because they were just lying around. And for them to have not come to us, for us to say we want this, and for them to be inviting other people to join them in supporting this initiative, and they don't even have the capability or the whatever you said, Captain Lee, to even run this business. I think we need to consider whether we even want this.
So this has some other ramifications to some other businesses as well. So that's why I'm moving into this very cautiously. We have some businesses who have been operating e-bicycles, and they've been operating it very successfully and very considerately. Do you agree, Captain Lee?
Oh, we definitely have businesses that rent bicycles from like a storefront, and they do it successfully
And it goes directly
creating
under the storefront. You direct, sort of under the awning. Scooters also on ISB and someone on Seabreeze. So they do it inside the building, and they're not a problem. This would impact them quite negatively, and they've been existing in business for more than 2 years already. And so this is a new person into the marketplace, and if we prohibit this, it will impact their business immediately.
Yes, just like it's impacting our city immediately.
Right. So what I'm requesting is that we try to have a little bit of how can we work with this idea and have restriction on it to the best of our ability, and then see what they do next.
I do want to draw a distinction between what you described there, because a motorized bike that's rented from a shop is, from what we see on our side of the house, is very similar to how somebody rents a regular bike from a shop.
Okay.
These when they have they're designed like a ride-sharing piece of equipment, where they're left and intended to be rented again from somewhere, or they're dropped at a docking station where they're intended to be rented by the next person from there. Those are the ones that tend to create more, I guess, clutter or hazard.
Sure. No, I agree with you. I just want to make sure that we're not impacting the existing businesses that we have who are doing the bicycle concept.
Right.
Because this would fall under the bicycle idea as well, correct? Am I correct, Mr. Jagger?
It depends on the business model. So the motorized bicycles could fall under the same business model where it's a web-based service and you swipe the card. So I know that's technically possible. I've seen them. But the model that you're referring to is, again, a point-to-point rental of
They are
a
different.
motorized
The
bike.
company I'm thinking of, it's you rent it in the facility and you return to the facility. It's not a ride-share concept.
Right, so
Maybe
it's not impacting that.
Maybe that's the distinction, but I want to make sure that distinction is there because we had a conversation where we said it could impact them. right? So I just want to be sure.
And could is the operative word in that sentence. If we make sure that it doesn't,
Right.
then we can move forward with
Is that
deciding whether we
possible
want
to
this or
do,
not.
Mr. Jagger?
Well, the regulations we're talking about have to do with online applications for these for these trips, if you will. So it's always been legal's opinion, and I think the police department as well, that they can operate like the motorized bicycle group, as long as they go from their point back to the point of sale, and that they operate lawfully, meaning they can't be on the sidewalks within the business districts if we treat them like bicycles. But they really have no authority to be on the sidewalk. And again, this gets back to the problem is we don't truly regulate them in our code. So if you want to keep them off the sidewalks, you need to regulate them. And that applies to whether you're talking about motorized scooters or motorized bicycles.
Okay.
I would say the gentleman currently could operate on the sidewalks because we don't prohibit it, absent some signage or other, other.
So I guess that's the first
adopted.
thing is no sidewalks. That's the first thing.
Yeah, that was what kind of pushed us to this point here, is we realized that we had very little, or what we felt was very little enforcement action to address just the sidewalk issue that would start to stem some of those
Right.
complaints from the businesses, yeah.
Okay, so where are we now?
I'd say no sidewalks, and also if we're going to do this, some docking stations, not just leaving them on the ground somewhere.
No,
A
yeah.
station where somebody else perhaps could even rent it from that station with
From
their
a
card or something.
An actual building.
The alternative to that is you have to return them to where you rented them from.
Right.
You can't just leave them on the sidewalk and
Exactly.
somebody come up and swipe a card.
Mhm.
So I share
I'd
your
go for that.
concerns, Paul.
Yes.
And through the TPO, we've heard nightmare stories from other places, Orlando in particular, about how this has gotten just completely out of control.
Right.
But I do think if somebody can make a buck off this, operating responsibly, I'd like that opportunity to be available in the community. So I would prefer to move forward with a way to regulate it. But Juanita, kind of where the three of you were discussing, you got to pick it up and drop it off at the same place. You can't leave it laying around. No sidewalks, 15-mile-an-hour maximum speed, and some sort of impound fee if we do get them.
And a citation for improper usage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you violate our code, then that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the rule. Those four things. And if it doesn't work, if it still is the Wild West over there,
We can come back and say bye.
Then we come back and maybe pull the plug on it
Okay.
entirely.
Thank you so much. The
Yeah, Rob, you
merchants
surmised that greatly.
The merchants on, go
If
ahead.
the goal is for people to get on these birds and to get from one, that's what they're called, birds.
Yeah.
If the goal is to get on this bird and to get from one place to the next place, I think it's counterproductive for the business to have them bring it back to where they rented it from.
Well, it's like the
I know
hotels
that
thing.
I know that I've used them quite a few times before, and I simply used them to get, because I didn't want to walk a long way from here. So I was at a hotel and I had to park far away. And so I just jumped on the bird and I just went straight up to my hotel building late at nighttime one night, and then I just left the bird there. I didn't have to take it back somewhere else, and that's the convenience of them. That's the purpose for using these mobile devices, is to get from one place to the next place. So I think in listening to all of your comments, when you talk about having them to have to take it to a docking station or having them to have to take it back to where they got it from, most people aren't going to want to use them. One, if you have to wait and take it back, it costs more money, because the longer you have it out and the longer you have it rented, your card is swiped and the minutes are going and going and going. So if you run into a store and you leave your little bird right there while you go into the store, it's going, and those things are like 25 cents a minute. So 4 minutes passes fast and 8 minutes passes fast. So if you're talking about a person running in the store for 8 or 9 minutes, 10 minutes, and then still having, while their credit card is running, and then having to ride it back to the place where they need to take it back to and check it back in, I don't know that it would be feasible for a business to even operate like that. If the purpose is to get, is just to move, a people mover to get you from place to place.
Sure. So actually, as you were speaking, I was just reminded of one more thing, time regulation, because we're finding that most offenses occur between 9, 10, 11, 12, and so restricting when they can actually use this. So they have drunk people using it late at night as well. And that's part of it, the rental, dropping it off, picking it up. There have people who are inebriated using it. And that's the complaint along Ocean Avenue.
Well, shouldn't that be the
wait a
business's
minute.
concern about renting it to someone that's intoxicated?
Well, you can pick it up, right? You can just
Yeah.
swipe and go.
Oh.
You
You
don't
just
know
swipe
who's
and
getting
go.
it. You don't know who's
no
getting it.
interaction.
So,
Okay.
dealing with right now, when I spoke to the company, is their attorney here, by the way?
Right
Said
here?
their attorney would be here tonight.
Oh, their attorney.
I don't know. Okay. So when I spoke with the company, really, they would do almost anything right now, I think, just to see what the program could do. They're willing to, am I right in that? I don't want to misrepresent him. Yes. Sure, we can, but they can't.
For the record, Jessica Gao with Cobb Cole Law Firm, 149 South Ridgewood Avenue. That's correct. We were recently brought on by the company. They're new to the area, so they thought that to go through this process, it's definitely at the very beginning. They're really open right now. Their business model is still changing just based on conversations. We started the conversation with city planning staff to kind of get the zoning aspect of this down to see where businesses are allowed and aren't allowed to operate. So we know it's definitely the very beginning, but they're definitely interested in pulling
So
in these
the
regulations.
sense that I got from speaking with them today was that they would do almost anything just to see kind of, whatever regulation we can come up with, I think they will go with it, just to make a go of it at first. And I'm willing to give them that opportunity because this concept, it's going to happen. Now, I will say there are many injuries associated with it. I did some research on it as well, but I also spoke to the merchants. I know who this impacts, and as long as there was regulation, they were willing to give it a try. So those are my thoughts.
I'm trying to get my head around, because I was thinking of it totally differently than you were, because I was thinking of it being purely entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, you're
They
renting
want to try
at a
it.
hotel.
They are not.
And you're cruising up to the boardwalk and getting some ice cream. And
For
then
us, it
heading
might
back to
be,
your
because
hotel.
she's been to major cities on these birds.
Yes, I go
Yeah.
to major cities. So everywhere my child travels for basketball, at the Georgia Dome, it's not the Georgia Dome anymore, what is it? The Mercedes Place, Kentucky. They're on every university campus. So everywhere you go, the goal is that wherever you are, if you want to ride 2 blocks down to the McDonald's, you get to the McDonald's 2 blocks down and you just leave your bird. They're more mainly for tourists who just want to get place to place.
Okay.
So to me, it would be hard, and I don't know if the attorney can correct me on this, it would be hard to require them to take it back to where I wouldn't do it.
I'm glad you brought it up, because it was a perspective I hadn't thought of, because the one of the operators has a hotel, or, over on the beach side. And, that was, this was a revenue source for him while, he was kind of shut down. But it was entertainment, and he wouldn't have had an issue with that. But you're right, and we've got 4 colleges, universities in Daytona Beach, and I think we might start seeing more prolific use out of the college kids in the line of what you're talking.
You absolutely are. They probably are on most college campuses. I'm surprised that they haven't hit our college campuses as of yet. But I don't know how this new order, how this would affect them as well, because I'm sure it would affect them as well.
Yeah.
And kids use them to get around campus. If your class is a mile away, you get on a bird and ride your bird, and you just leave it there. So, yeah, those are things that we need to consider as well.
I think city staff has also had that experience in other cities, and we agree that there are some cities that are very well designed for this type of activity. And there's public transportation that maybe you get off the bus and you catch you grab one of these birds and you take it to where you parked your car, and it's very convenient. And I think the question really is for you guys is our city designed for that, and where in our city does it work? Because we could even agree that there's probably some areas in the city where this would be convenient and it would be maybe a nice addition to our city. I personally am not sure the core is the area, just based on the sidewalk sizes.
To add to that, I agree with you, because everywhere I went, they seemed to just be all over the place, and there seemed to not have been any order. And I don't know if the city just was, this is what it is for their city, but you're right, they were everywhere. They just lay them down, throw them down, and they were all over every city I went to.
Do they have a remedy for this at all?
Yeah, so GoAx as a company, I think they're open to either leasing docking stations where it would be a leased property where they would return. They're really open to the business to business where they have to return them back to the same place. And I did want to say, I don't know if they mentioned it to you, Commissioner May. Part of the timing incident where the incidents happened late at night, part of it was their evolving business model. They've since hired those pickup trucks that go through and collect the scooters when the operators abandon them. They've adopted an overnight shift, so they're hoping that that will help facilitate some of the changes as well.
What are your thoughts, Captain Lee?
At this point, I think I've given all the context and facts I could really provide. I think it's just really up to you guys to make a decision what you think is best for the city.
So my request to the commission is that we see how far we get with the regulation portion. And I say that because there are some other businesses who do e-bikes who would be affected by this, and that is their primary business, and it has been their primary business for 2+ years. And so the regulation would it have a negative impact on them? Anything that we do would have a negative impact on the e-bikes? Because we cannot regulate one and not the other.
We're regulating sidewalks here, so that's an important point to keep in mind. So if you were to treat scooters and motorized bicycles the same as most regulations do, and you were to prohibit them throughout the city, then of course that business would no longer be allowed to operate with regard to use on the sidewalks.
So if we just dumped this idea of taking it back to where you got it from or having docking stations, but made it something that saying you couldn't leave it on a sidewalk, you know, or it could be impounded, you know, then the guy with the motel could rent them out and say, look, you got to bring it back.
Yeah.
The company, a different company that maybe has docking stations could make an arrangement with the Volusia Mall to have a docking station there, and you know, different places where you might see some kids from different colleges or universities, you know, going there and having dinner or something.
Typically, the city would license a docking station in addition, so we would authorize certain areas where they would be allowed to park.
And so my concern with docking stations are great, but my concern becomes not on the sidewalks, correct? The docking stations
Could be on the sidewalk.
Would be inside. The goal is my concept is inside because they take up room on the sidewalk, and our sidewalks are already small in the beachside area. They're very.
But if they put it on a sidewalk outside the Volusia Mall, that's not the same. You know, so if they wanted to put it on public property, they would have to license it through us, and we would be able to say there's not enough room there to.
Just like bike racks.
Yeah.
You know.
So again, my primary concern, if I can just get that done, I'd be happy, is that I would like it to not be on my sidewalks on that side of the town, right, as you've noticed, or just left lying around abandoned, and then the impound fees and citations, and also regulating time, meaning the drinking at night and picking it up, which would not be allowed if you're getting it from a building, right? If you're renting it from someone and returning it to someone, then it's not an issue.
I'll go with you on the majority of that, except they should be able to ride it whenever they want. Many times people late at night is when you want to ride one because you've been out, you've been walking, and you just want to quickly get back to your hotel, or you quickly want to get back to your car or whatever. So I'll support those things, but I won't support them not being able to ride it when they feel they need to ride it.
So I'm extremely happy with that. Thank you very much. And my hope is that in the future, we can continue this conversation, and should the need arise to regulate the evening activity, then I'm hoping we can maybe revisit that at a later time.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
If I could address that briefly, you could require that they have lights, for instance. And if someone is inebriated, they'd be subject to driving while intoxicated.
That's what I was about to say.
You could require that they what? I didn't hear you.
That they have a light. They have lights on the devices at night.
And if they're inebriated, it's like driving.
Bob, you got enough to work with?
DUI.
I'm not sure. I'd like to hear your summary again.
Well, we all agreed on no sidewalks.
Correct.
And I think sidewalks throughout the city. Not
Throughout the city.
Businesses. Okay.
That they can't
Speed, 15 miles
the
an hour.
15 mile an hour. That they either have to be, well, we weren't going to go there. We're going to go with that they couldn't be deposited, you know, left unattended or left abandoned on a sidewalk or right of way.
But we'll build in a docking station possibility
Option.
if they have a license with the city.
Or a business operator that has a docking
You know, it could be on private property, of course.
Yeah.
As long as it's not an outside display, it'd have to be inside.
Inside.
Or it could be licensed on a sidewalk or other right-of-way through the city manager.
So outside, so there's some places, if you had a docking station at Volusia Mall or One Daytona or something, they may not think that's, because it looks like a bike rack. So you just stick the thing in there. They're not going to want to put that inside a store. So maybe if there's put a size on the store that if it's, or the shopping center, that if it's below a certain square footage, 10,000 square feet, they have to be indoors, and if it's greater than 10,000 square feet, it can be outdoors, provided it's properly maintained.
You're on your own on that one.
And you see where I'm going with that, Bob?
I do. Let me see what I can come up with.
Or if they have the space outside. I mean, you want to showcase that you have these things for rent. If they're on the inside, no one would know that they're accessible and wouldn't rent them. Like surfboards and stuff, they bring them out to show that they're available, then they take them in at night. So if they've got the space in its concrete area that's their private property, that can showcase them.
I think they're pretty much like the bicycles, just bicycles. The ones you see in the big cities where they have a staging area where you can pick up a bike, you just rent it, you swipe it and go. These things sound like the same deal to me. You got a credit card and you swipe it and you can ride it for whatever minutes you're allowed. So I think you treat it like you would the bike area and require there be designated areas for them to be deposited.
Commissioner May, these electronic bikes that you're referring to, are they individual bikes?
Yes, they're individual bikes, and they,
Mike?
individual bikes, they have pedals on them. Oh, sorry. Thank you. They're bicycles, but they have pedals on them as well, so you don't have to use the motor. And I spoke with them also because I thought this might impact them negatively. And they said that, they don't go on sidewalks. They're actually using the roadway or the bicycle lane, so the sidewalk doesn't impact them. But the way that we craft this ordinance could impact their business.
I understand.
That's what I'm being cautious about.
Yes, you said that a couple of times. My question, however, is, once I wanted to know, were they individual? Do they return them to the shop or do they have bike rack things?
They return them to the shop, inside the shop. They return them.
Okay.
But I presume those
So I'm
aren't
for both
equipped with
stations
the
and
credit card
return.
swipe. Those are simply like renting a bike,
Mhm.
motorized.
Okay.
There's no ability to swipe it or pick it up elsewhere.
Okay.
So they don't have a
Okay,
swipe
so
card thing.
so I've got no sidewalks, speed limit of 50 miles per hour.
50?
15.
Oh.
Docking would be allowed on private property, potentially outside, subject to certain restrictions, which we'll have to think about a bit further. Or it could be licensed on public property through the city manager. Are there any other restrictions? I would imagine you'd want some parking restrictions for people that are just going in for a cup of coffee or something.
Them like a car or bicycle, where would they go?
Well,
If there was no rack, where would they park the bicycle?
what I've seen in many of the regulations are just parking restrictions within the sidewalk. They would have to be, again, upright and not blocking ingress or
Have little
egress
kickstands, don't
or
they?
passage. What was drafted required 5 feet of passage for pedestrians.
And so,
But
I mean, on beachside, there is no room for 5 feet. If you park it,
then,
and there's
then
no
they
room
wouldn't be
there.
allowed to park on that sidewalk.
Okay.
And they need to be on a kickstand, on the kickstand.
Yes, that's a typical requirement.
Yep, the standard rate.
So some general restrictions on, that would allow some parking temporarily on sidewalks. Am I hearing that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to know something. If we were to give them a ticket for improper parking, who is fined?
That, again, goes to the operator of the device, not the rental company.
We just take it?
You couldn't impound it for, I guess we could try drafting that, but typically what I see is that you impound them for not having a license. You would not impound them for improper parking. If it's abandoned, that's another question.
Yeah, yeah, if it was abandoned on the sidewalk, then we could impound it.
Right.
You would fine the company for not having a license. Is that what we're saying?
You would fine the company for not having a license.
Mhm, to operate.
Okay.
Yes.
And did we also agree on returning it to the company and little parking stations, subject to the managers? Okay, all right.
The three
I should
options,
both
right?
in
You
there.
could return to the company, you could put it in a licensed docking station, or it could be on a private property docking station.
So, Captain Lee, can I ask you a question? Captain Lee, can I ask you a question? Captain Lee, yoo-hoo. I have a question for you, sir. It's okay. The question is, if there was a parking violation, how would you handle it?
Well, I guess the question for me would be how, on these types of devices, I don't think there would be any way for the officer to know whether the device was now abandoned on the sidewalk there or whether somebody had parked it there. To them, it's going to appear the same in both fashion. So it would be a matter of whether it was creating a hazard or not.
Yeah. We could define abandonment. I've seen certain regulations where if it's left for a certain number of hours, it's presumed to be abandoned. So that's something we could handle. If it's if it's left in a way that it's dangerous, I suppose we could pound those as well.
Okay.
Yeah, levels of warning. I mean, we do have stuff like that with vehicles on the right way where you give a 24-hour notice for moving it. Not always the most effective way to enforce for us, but that is an option, yes.
So I have another question. Code has been taking care of this.
I'm sorry?
Code has been being responsible for this?
Most of this has been a law enforcement issue.
Okay.
Some of it has been code enforcement when we've been dealing with the businesses that have been participating in it that are local.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because the business itself that's conducting business isn't physically located in the city, it makes it a little difficult for code enforcement to take action. So we've been dealing with it from a law enforcement standpoint as far as the blocking of public right-of-ways, the hazards that it's created, or the issues that it's created as far as calls for service.
Okay.
Bob, where do these insurance limits come from?
This would be part of the permitting and licensing requirements.
But the limits, like the commercial liability is $5 million per occurrence and $5 million aggregate.
Right.
The automobile is $1 million. The work comp is $100,000 per accident, $100,000 per employee, $500. So where did you find those?
Yeah, those are actually numbers we pulled from the St. Petersburg regulations. I did run those by the risk manager. He indicated that they're on the high side, but looking out for the city, he was not objecting to them. But those could be manipulated downward if they were not reasonably available in the marketplace or just cost prohibitive.
I'm just a little, the mom and pop guy won't be able to afford policy limits to that extent to be able to, participate. Because it sounds awful high.
Let me get with risk. We'll see if we can adjust those down and still provide adequate protections for the city.
Or maybe would make sense to have it like a per number of units that you operate. So if you only got 10, you have a lower limit than if you got 50 or 100. I mean, it's because mom and pop's not going to have 100 of these things out there. They'll have 10, maybe 20, probably 10.
All right, I'll be glad to draft something to that effect, and we can review it when it comes around for first reading.
Okay. And you have the age limit in here at 16, but we're not going to require like a driver's license or anything like that.
Oh, let's talk about this one.
No person under the age of 16 shall operate a motorized scooter, unlawful parent, guardian, minor child, knowingly permit. So where were you thinking?
One of the issues that we were having along the ocean side was that grandparents might be renting the vehicle, but then the child, the 12-year-old, 11-year-old, 15-year-old, whatever, is using and operating it. And because it's a swipe system, they're using the grandparents' cards, parents' cards, and then taking the product. And this way, if it's actually in one place and they have to rent and return, I guess they could still do it, but we have a little bit more, liability in terms of we know who's doing what.
Well, it would be drafted so that it would prohibit not only minors, but prohibit adults from allowing minors to operate.
That's what it's unlawful for the parent, legal guardian, or custodian of a minor child to knowingly permit the child to violate any provision of this division. That's the second half of the section with the 16-year age. Now, what about allowing them to operate on private property? So the guy with the motel, somebody rents it for their 12-year-old and lets them ride it, somewhere on that motel's property.
So we aren't, the drafts that I've seen and what I've provided don't regulate use on private property. We regulate use on public property. The rentals on private property, of course, they incur their own liability and would want
Yeah.
insurance and so on. So that's not something we've gotten into.
So the way this is written is only applies to public property?
Only to sidewalks, actually, yes.
Okay. Okay, no, I'm good.
Okay, I will put a draft together and circulate it and get it on first reading as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for that discussion. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome job, team.
That was our final item for the agenda.
Okay, who did we start with? Wasn't
Commissioner Delgado.
Oh, Commissioner Delgado.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to, thank you guys for covering for me in my absence. We had a beautiful baby boy. Everything is great. So thank you all for that. And, that's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner May?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support this evening, and have a nice week. Have a safe week.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Commissioner Gilliland?
Not sure if everybody's on that Consolidated Tomoka or whatever their new name is email thing, but Avalon Park did buy that 3,100 acres west of 95. The press release came out yesterday that they had closed on the deal, so they have already purchased it. And the only entitlements they have is what passed for Minto for the second half of Margaritaville at this point in time. Where do we stand with the RFP for the city manager search? It'll be circulated soon? Okay. And congratulations to the Delgado family. And that is all I have tonight. Good night.
All right. Great job, sir. Commissioner Henry?
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Reed?
Just a few things. I just wanted to let you all know that I've asked the manager to add the disparity study for a discussion on our next agenda, and I sent you all a copy of that again as per your request from the last meeting, so now you'll have 4 weeks to review it. Also, staff, did you get an opportunity to look at the paperwork I sent for the bridge, for Bethune-Cookman, the pedestrian bridge? And I sent that email as well. You may not have had a chance. And there was a comment from TPO in there too, Rob, in regards to, you saw that? Good. And lastly, I also asked for signage for the Thurman House. Now that they've become a registered national landmark for us, we're going to put a signage at MLK and ISB to let people know where the Thurman House is as a national landmark in our city. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on the Thurman House. It is an important part of our history and our heritage, and it's good to see you working on that and your team, and I sincerely, personally appreciate that as one who loves Thurman's work.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Traeger.
I'm so sorry to say that Florida has a dubious honor of having as most cases in the country, about 3 days in a row. But there is a little ray of sunshine. Moderna has gotten into their third phase of a vaccine. The ones that they did have, they don't know how long it will last, but they did make the antibodies and with minimal side effects. So if we keep our fingers crossed on that, and there's another firm, Pfizer and a German biotech, who's also working on a vaccine. So God willing, that'll happen and we can get rid of these masks.
Yeah, Ruth, if I can add on to that. So Moderna, to get through phase 1 and 2, they did 6 years of work in 6 months.
I know.
It's absolutely, they are, of the 4 that are going to human trial, or they're in human trials, they're ahead of everybody else. But it could be as early as 6 months before there's a vaccine. And their plan is when they're starting at the end of this month with, I believe, a 30,000 person trial.
Right.
The last one, it was 45 people. They did 3 sets of 15 with 25 micrograms 100 micrograms and 250.
But they
People
did
that
say
had
you
250.
needed two shots.
Yeah, yes, and the people who got the 250 evidently didn't do all that great, so that maybe that was a little too high, but everybody that got it developed antibodies.
Well, my
So-
goodness, even if we have more than one vaccine.
Yep, you're right. I mean, this is
You know?
very positive news that we might have something in as little as 6 months. Their plan is, as they're going through phase 3 with the 30,000 person study, that they're going to start production so that the day basically that they get their FDA approval, they can start,
I heard the
give people
figure
the vaccine.
400 million by the end of the year, if
Yep.
everything goes well.
Yeah, it is moving along very well. All of the information that's coming out so far has been positive.
Awesome.
That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Reed, did I understand you to say that you sent us some information on a disparate for us to review and study for a disparity discussion?
Yes, sir. I sent you the report that I sent about a couple of months ago.
Okay, so you've sent that to us again, and you want us to review that and then have a discussion as it relates to our city and where we are? What are we going to be discussing?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I'd like for us to discuss it and see where we are in regards to our city and the potential of conducting a disparity study for us as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to that.
All right.
That's our equity initiative is going along wonderfully well. I want to take just a few moments to say to staff what an outstanding job they have done in assisting me in these discussions and bringing this to light. And the community has responded in a phenomenal way. It is, as I've said before, it's an organic process, one that started out as this and is evolving into that. So it requires a lot of work that staff usually is not a part of their normal duty. But the longer I'm serving as mayor, the more I'm not as conventional as I might have been during the first 3 or 4 years. So I require probably more attention than they may be accustomed to as a mayor. But I do appreciate that, and I will honestly say I don't see that slowing down. But I appreciate what they've done, and it's been good. And the community's response has been quite amazing. And so I'll share some correspondence with you all this week as to what our plans are for the next week. Next week, we will have 5 sessions that will be billed and not as listening sessions. These were listening sessions where we heard. Now we will have 5, basically what I refer to as sessions where we may be challenged to see people take some action and make some commitments and make some plans to do things as it relates to equity. So again, thanks to staff. I want to say also that I had a conversation with the city attorney as well as the city manager in reference to some of what was stated during our last meeting as it related to affordable housing. And in that meeting, the manager, much to my pleasure, had already started some discussions with the Housing Authority and others, and had already started to think about ways that we could put some teeth into our expectations as it relates to housing authority, as it relates to housing and affordable housing. And the city attorney and I discussed some options. So what I want the two of them to do is to go ahead and prepare something, and I would certainly be happy and delighted to share with them, more of my sentiments. I've had a little bit more of a chance to think about those, but something to bring back to us for our next meeting to consider, because I think we made a commitment as a commission to say that affordable housing was important to us. And it certainly was for me the last 2 years thing that I wanted to accomplish most. And in hindsight, the reality is that we really haven't done anything. And I do not want this session to end with that being the case. So I would like them to bring something before us for our consideration. And we've kicked this down the road, and we've discussed many things over the years. We've workshopped it, and I've seen a lot of different models from other cities. But I would like to see us bring something before the commission for us to discuss and consider implementation. And so that is where I am on that. And the second and final thing is, or I don't know if it's the second, probably the fifth, but as it relates to the Citizens Review Board, I think it is a good step for our city. We have a super police department. We have great residents who have great regard and great respect by and large for our police department. And I think this is simply a step in the right direction for us to be stronger together. You know, and by all means, as I've said before, we're not perfect in any area of our city. And so you improve by not resting and assuming that you are so good that you can't improve. You know, and so complacency is the enemy of progress. And so I push us not to be complacent on any area. So with that said, Mr. Manager, do you have anything?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think you covered everything we talked about.
Okay, sorry. But Mr. City Attorney, do you have anything?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and good night, Daytona Beach.